The city folded before the sirens started. It happened in the commercial district first. A ripple-like heat shimmer on asphalt spread across 3 city blocks. Storefronts buckled. Glass didn't shatter so much as warp, bending into shapes that hurt to look at. People stumbled as the pavement beneath them shifted their quirks, misfiring in bursts of flame that fizzled strength that flickered on and off like a broken light switch. Ben Tennyson hit the ground hard enough to crack concrete. He came up in a crouch, and immediately understood 3 things. 1, he wasn't in his universe anymore. 2, whatever had just happened wasn't natural. 3, the screaming meant people needed help, and nobody was moving fast enough to provide it. The Ultimatrix pulsed green against his wrist. Still working. That was something. A woman stumbled past him, flames dying on her fingertips as she clutched a child. The kid was crying. Ben moved before he could think, catching them both, as a streetlight collapsed where they'd been standing half a second earlier. The metal bent like rubber, sparking against the pavement. "You okay?" he asked. The woman stared at him. Her eyes went to the Ultimatrix, then to his face, then back to the device. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. "I'll take that as a yes," Ben said, and set them down behind a still intact storefront. "Stay here. Don't move unless something's about to fall on you." He didn't wait for a response. The street was chaos. Not the organized kind he'd seen in hero zones back home where plumbers and local authorities had protocols and communication grids. This was raw panic. People ran in every direction. Cars had stopped in the middle of intersections. Drivers slumped over steering wheels or staggering out with glazed expressions. A fire hydrant burst water shooting 30 feet into the air before cutting off abruptly, then starting again. Everything pulsed. On, off. Stable, unstable. Ben pressed the Ultimatrix. The dial cycled through familiar silhouettes. He needed speed first. Get people out of the danger zone, then figure out what was causing this. XL. R8's form locked in. He slammed his palm down. The transformation was instant. Blue Scale's aerodynamic build sphere feet that could hit speeds most people couldn't track with their naked eye. Ben moved and the world slowed to a crawl around him. He grabbed an elderly man frozen mid-fall and deposited him in a clear zone. A teenage girl with horns, her quirks sparking uselessly around her hands, went next. Then a group of office workers, a guy in a chef's uniform, 2 kids who looked barely old enough for middle school. Ben worked in silence. No quips, no commentary, just movement. Grab, move, deposit. Grab, move, deposit. He'd done this before. Different world and same stakes. A building groaned. He looked up. The apartment complex on the corner was tilting. Not collapsing yet, but the foundation had cracked. People were visible in the windows, some banging on the glass, others just standing there, in shock. XLR8 wouldn't cut it. He needed strength. The Ultimatrix flashed red as the timer hit 0. Ben was human again for exactly 2 seconds before he cycled to the next form. 4 arms locked in. He hit the symbol. The transformation hurt less than it used to. Practice, maybe, or just experience with pain. 4 massive arms, red skin, enhanced musculature that could bench a semi-truck without breaking a sweat. Ben didn't waste time admiring the upgrade. He moved to the building, braced all 4 hands against the tilting structure, and pushed. The metal groaned. Concrete dust rained down. Ben's feet dug into the pavement, cracking it further, but the building stopped moving, stopped tilting. He held it there, muscles straining, and shouted up at the windows. "Get out! Fire escape stairs!" I don't care. Move. They moved. It took 90 seconds for the building to empty. Felt like 90 minutes. Ben counted faces as they fled down the fire escape, made sure the last one was clear, then let go and rolled aside as the structure finally gave up and collapsed inward with a sound like thunder. When the dust cleared, the spot where he'd been standing was buried under 3 floors of rubble. Ben pushed himself up, shook off the debris, and scanned the area. The chaos had lessened. Not stopped, but lessened. People were getting to safety now, dragging each other out of the affected zone. The weird ripple effect was fading, quirks stabilizing. He cycled back to human form and took stock. No major casualties that he could see. Injuries, sure. Shock, definitely. But everyone he'd pulled out was breathing. That counted as a win in his book. Freeze! The voice came from behind him. Calm, authoritative. The kind of tone that expected immediate compliance. Ben turned slowly. The man standing 15 feet away looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Long black hair, tired eyes, some kind of capture weapon wrapped around his neck like a scarf. He wore dark clothing, practical boots, and carried himself with the kind of economy of movement that meant combat training. Hands where I can see them, the man said. Ben raised his hands. Not because he was scared, but because escalating wouldn't help anybody. I was just helping people. Unlicensed quirk usage in a crisis zone. The man's eyes narrowed. That's a violation of Hero Public Safety Commission regulations. You're coming with me for processing. Processing, Ben repeated. He glanced at the collapsed building, the people being led away by what looked like emergency responders in matching uniforms. Right. Because that's the priority right now. The priority is maintaining order. The man's capture weapon shifted slightly, which includes ensuring unknown individuals with unregistered quirks don't operate without oversight. Ben looked at the Ultimatrix, looked back at the man. This isn't a quirk. Then what is it? Complicated. The man's expression didn't change. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got right now, Ben said. He lowered his hand slowly, making sure the movement was visible and non-threatening. Look, I don't know what a quirk is. I don't know what your commission is. I just saw people in trouble and helped. That's it. That's it, the man echoed flat. Yeah. For a moment, neither of them moved. Ben could feel the weight of the stare, the assessment happening behind those tired eyes. This wasn't someone who made snap judgments. This was someone who watched, calculated, and acted with precision. Finally, the man spoke. My name is Shota Aizawa. I'm a pro-hero. You're going to come with me, answer some questions, and let people who know what they're doing figure out what you are. And if I don't, then I'll assume you're a threat. Ben considered that. Considered the fact that he had no idea where he was, how he'd gotten here, or how to get back. Considered that starting a fight with local law enforcement, or whatever this guy was, would make everything exponentially worse. He also considered that this Aizawa person had waited until after the rescue was done to approach him. That counted for something. Fine, Ben said. But I'm not a threat. And I'm definitely not whatever you think I am. We'll see. Aizawa gestured. 2 more figures appeared from the periphery, both in hero costumes that looked designed for maximum visibility. One had some kind of speaker system built into their outfit. The other had reinforced armor plating and carried restraints that glowed faintly. They approached carefully. Professional. Ben didn't resist when they guided him away from the disaster zone. He kept his hands visible, his posture non-threatening, and his mouth shut. Arguing now wouldn't help. Better to wait, assess, and figure out what kind of world he'd landed in. Behind them, the commercial district was already transforming. Emergency crews moved in with practiced efficiency. News drones hovered at a safe distance, cameras tracking every movement. Someone was setting up a perimeter with holographic tape that read, "Authorized personnel only," in multiple languages. Ben watched it all with a growing sense of unease. This wasn't just organized. This was systematized. Every person had a role. Every action followed a protocol. Even the way people were being interviewed and processed had a bureaucratic precision to it. Back home in his universe, things were messier. Plumbers showed up, saved who they could, and dealt with the paperwork later. Here it felt like the paperwork came first. A news drone swung closer camera lens, focusing on Ben's face. Aizawa stepped between them without breaking stride, and the drone backed off. "Media blackout on unregistered individuals," Aizawa said more to himself than to Ben. "Standard procedure." "Standard procedure," Ben muttered. "Right." They reached a transport vehicle, unmarked, armored with tinted windows that didn't let anyone see inside. One of the heroes opened the door. Aizawa gestured for Ben to get in. Ben hesitated, not because he was afraid, but because every instinct he had was screaming that this was wrong, not dangerous wrong, just wrong, like watching a machine that ran too smoothly with too many gears and no room for improvisation. "Problem?" Aizawa asked. "No," Ben said and climbed inside. The door shut behind him with a heavy final sound. Through the tinted window he could see the commercial district receding, see the emergency crews working with mechanical precision, see the news drones circling like vultures. And he could see on one of the nearby screens, visible through a storefront window, a news ticker scrolling past in bright red letters. "Unidentified individual uses, unknown quirk in District 7. Crisis. Hero Public Safety Commission investigating." Ben leaned back against the seat and closed his eyes. Great. Just great. The ultimatrix pulsed against his wrist, a steady rhythm that matched his heartbeat. Still working, still functional, still his. Whatever this world was, whatever these quirks were, whatever this commission wanted from him, one thing was certain. He'd landed in the middle of something complicated. And complications in his experience had a way of getting worse before they got better. The transport vehicle rumbled to life and began moving. Ben counted the turns in his head, tracking their route out of habit. North, then east, then north again. They were heading toward what looked like a more secure part of the city. Taller buildings, less foot traffic, more surveillance. Aizawa sat across from him, silent, watching. Ben met his gaze. "So, you guys always this welcoming to people who save lives?" "We're welcoming," Aizawa said, "to people who follow the rules." "And I didn't." "No, you didn't." Ben almost laughed. Almost, but the situation wasn't funny. It was dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with fighting. This wasn't about strength or powers. This was about systems, rules, order maintained through paperwork and oversight. He'd seen it before in different forms, the Forever Knights, the Hybrid, even the plumbers sometimes, when they got too caught up in protocol. But this felt different. This felt like an entire society built on the idea that power had to be licensed, regulated, controlled, and he'd just walked in without asking permission. The transport hit a bump. Ben's hand went to the ultimatrix, instinctively ready to transform if this turned into a trap. But Aizawa didn't move, didn't react, just kept watching with those tired, calculating eyes. Relax, Aizawa said. If we wanted you unconscious, you'd already be unconscious. Comforting. It's meant to be factual. Ben settled back, but didn't relax. Couldn't relax. Not until he knew what he was dealing with. Outside the city continued functioning. People walked. Cars drove. Everything moved with the kind of normalcy that came from practice, from repetition, from a society that had adapted to living with superpowers so thoroughly that they'd built entire legal frameworks around them. Back home in his world, the Omnitrix was unique, one of a kind. Here it seemed like everyone had something, which meant everyone was either an asset or a threat depending on how you looked at it. Ben glanced at Aizawa again. The man hadn't blinked once since they'd gotten in the vehicle. What? Aizawa asked. Just wondering, Ben said. If everyone here has powers, why do you need heroes? Because power doesn't equal responsibility, Aizawa said. And without structure, it becomes chaos. Ben thought about the commercial district, about the people he'd saved, about the system that had shown up after the fact to process everything into neat little categories. Yeah, he said quietly. I can see that. The transport made one final turn and pulled into an underground garage. The door shut behind them with a sound like a vault ceiling. Aizawa stood. Come on. Time to answer some questions. Ben followed him out into a sterile hallway, lined with doors that had no windows and keypads that required authorization to open. Somewhere above them, he knew the news was already spinning the story. Unknown individual, unregistered quirk, potential threat. He'd saved lives. But in this world, apparently, that wasn't enough. You needed permission first. Ben's jaw tightened as they walked deeper into the facility. He'd play along, for now. Answer their questions, be cooperative. But if they thought they could control him with paperwork and regulations, they were about to learn something important. He didn't ask for permission to do the right thing, and he never would. The room had no windows. Ben noticed that first. White walls, white ceiling, white table with 4 chairs arranged in a configuration that suggested conversation but felt like interrogation. Recessed lighting cast everything in flat, even illumination that erased shadows and made it impossible to tell what time of day it was. He'd been here for 3 hours. He knew because the Ultimatrix kept time and he'd checked it 17 times since they'd let him in and asked him to wait. The door opened. No knock. Just the soft hiss of a security lock disengaging. 2 people entered. The first was a woman in her 40s gray suit posture that screamed bureaucrat with power. Her expression was carefully neutral, the kind of face that had been trained to show exactly what she wanted to show and nothing more. The second was a man in his 50s, also suited, also controlled, carrying a tablet that probably had Ben's entire life cataloged by now. Aizawa came in behind them and took a position by the door, observing, not participating. The woman sat across from Ben. The man remained standing. Mr. Tennyson, the woman said. Her voice was professional, warm but not genuine. Thank you for your patience. I'm Director Miyazaki with the Hero Public Safety Commission. This is Administrator Tanaka. Ben didn't move. You're welcome. Can I go now? We'd like to have a conversation first. Pretty long conversation for someone who just helped with a disaster. Miyazaki's expression didn't change. That's precisely what we'd like to discuss. Your intervention in District 7 was noted. Lives were saved. Property damage was minimized. By all accounts, you acted with considerable skill and restraint. Ben waited. There was a but coming. There was always a but. However, Miyazaki continued, We have no record of you. No quirk registration, no hero license, no authorization to operate in a crisis zone. According to our database, Benjamin Kirby Tennyson doesn't exist in Japan, or anywhere else for that matter. I'm not from around here. Clearly. Tanaka tapped his tablet. We'd like to understand where you are from, and what you are. Ben glanced at Aizawa. The hero's expression was unreadable, but he didn't look hostile, just watchful. I'm from Earth, Ben said. Different one than this, apparently. As for what I am, I'm human. The device on my wrist is technology. Alien technology, but technology, not a quirk. Alien technology, Miyazaki repeated as if testing the words. Yeah. You're asking us to believe you're from another dimension. I'm not asking you to believe anything, Ben said. I'm telling you what happened. I got pulled through some kind of dimensional rift, landed in your commercial district, and helped people who needed help. That's it. Tanaka's fingers moved across the tablet screen. Your device. The Ultimatrix, you called it. It allows you to transform into multiple species with distinct physiologies and capabilities. Yes. And you have full control over these transformations. Mostly. Mostly, Tanaka echoed. Ben shrugged. Sometimes it times out faster than I'd like. Sometimes it gives me the wrong alien. But yeah, I control when and what I transform into. Miyazaki leaned forward slightly. Mr. Tennyson, I want to be very clear about something. We're not your enemies. The Hero Public Safety Commission exists to maintain order and protect civilian lives in a society where 80% of the population possesses superpowers. We have protocols, regulations, systems in place to ensure that power is used responsibly. And I used mine responsibly, Ben said. I saved lives, didn't hurt anyone, didn't cause collateral damage. You did, Miyazaki agreed. But you also operated without authorization in a controlled crisis zone. You used unregistered abilities that fall outside our regulatory framework. You became a variable we couldn't account for. A variable. Yes. Ben sat back. The chair was uncomfortable by design, probably. Everything in this room was designed, calculated, meant to make people compliant through sheer bureaucratic pressure. He'd seen it before. Different worlds, different systems, same playbook. Make the individual feel small. Make the rules feel inevitable. Make compliance seem like the only rational choice. So what do you want? He asked. Cooperation, Miyazaki said simply. We want to establish a framework for your presence here while we work on understanding your situation and potentially helping you return home. Framework. A temporary hero license, provisional status. You'd be allowed to use your abilities under supervision. In exchange, you'd agree to certain conditions. Ben waited. Tanaka pulled up a document on his tablet and turned it so Ben could see. The text was dense legal language wrapped around what amounted to a leash. Standard provisions, Tanaka said. Registration of all capabilities, mandatory reporting after any quirk usage, location monitoring for security purposes, compliance with HPSC directives during crisis situations, media restrictions to prevent public panic. Ben read through it. The language was careful, neutral. But underneath the bureaucratic polish, the message was clear. Do what we say when we say it, or lose permission to act at all. You want me to ask permission every time someone needs help, Ben said. We want you to operate within established guidelines, Miyazaki corrected. Heroes in this society function as part of a larger system. They're trained, licensed, and held accountable. What you did today was admirable. But without structure, even good intentions can lead to chaos. Ben looked at the document again, looked at the clauses about compliance and monitoring and restrictions, looked at the section that outlined what happened if he violated any provision. Immediate suspension, potential detention, classification as a vigilante operating outside legal bounds. He thought about the commercial district, about the people he'd pulled out of collapsing buildings, about the woman with the kid flames dying on her fingertips, who'd looked at him like he was something impossible. He thought about what would have happened if he'd waited for authorization, for permits, for someone to tell him it was okay to save lives. What if I refuse? He asked. Miyazaki's expression remained neutral. Then we'd have to classify you as an unregistered quirk user operating illegally. We'd be forced to take measures to ensure public safety. Measures, detention, restriction of movement, possible prosecution under hero law. Ben's jaw tightened. For saving people, for operating without oversight in a regulated society. Miyazaki's tone didn't change, didn't harden or soften, just stayed perfectly, infuriatingly level. Mr. Tennyson, I understand this seems restrictive, but we've had decades of experience managing a world where powers are commonplace. Without structure, without accountability, society breaks down. We've seen it happen. We've spent years building systems to prevent it from happening again. She was good, Ben had to admit. She framed it as necessity, as protection, as the only logical way to handle a society full of superpowered individuals. And maybe in their world she was even right. But Ben had seen what happened when systems became more important than people. When rules mattered more than results, when asking permission took priority over doing what was right. He'd fought wars over it. I need to think about it, he said. Of course. Miyazaki gestured to Tanaka, who tapped the tablet and brought up another screen. In the meantime, you'll remain here under observation. We'll provide quarters, basic necessities, access to information about our society so you can better understand the situation. So I'm detained. You're a guest, Miyazaki said, pending compliance. The phrasing was careful, deliberate. Not a prisoner, not free. Something in between that had no good name. Ben stood. The ultimatrix pulsed against his wrist, a steady green rhythm. Still functional, still his. Fine, he said. I'll think about your framework. But I'm not promising anything. That's all we ask. Miyazaki rose as well, smoothing her suit. Administrator Tanaka will show you to your quarters. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to ask. She left. Professional, controlled, mission accomplished. Tanaka gestured toward the door. This way. Ben followed, hyper-aware of Aizawa trailing behind. The hero hadn't said a word during the entire meeting, hadn't offered support or condemnation, just watched. The hallway outside was as sterile as the room, white walls recessed lighting doors with keypads instead of handles. They passed other people in suits, all moving with purpose, all ignoring Ben completely. It felt like being invisible and hypervisible at the same time. They reached an elevator. Tanaka scanned his badge and pressed the button for sub-level 3. The descent was smooth and silent. The media's already picked up on your appearance, Tanaka said, breaking the quiet. We've issued a statement describing you as a visiting hero from an allied nation pending proper documentation. That should buy time while we sort out your status. You mean while you decide what to do with me? While we establish appropriate protocols, Tanaka corrected, but his tone suggested the distinction didn't matter much. The elevator doors opened onto another corridor. This one had numbered doors instead of keypads. Still sterile, but marginally more human. Like dormitories designed by someone who'd never actually lived in one. Tanaka stopped at door 17 and pressed his palm against a scanner. The lock clicked open. "Your quarters," he said. "Basic amenities. Network access is restricted, but you'll have access to educational materials about Hero Society. Meals will be delivered. If you need anything else, use the call button by the door." Ben looked inside. Single room. Bed desk, small bathroom visible through an open doorway. Window that probably wasn't real. A cell with better furniture. "Great," Ben said. "Thanks." Tanaka nodded and left without another word. Aizawa remained. Ben turned to face him. "You going to say something or just keep staring?" "They're not wrong," Aizawa said. His voice was quiet. "Tired. This society needs structure. Without it, people die." "People die when you wait for permission too," Ben said. "Sometimes." Aizawa's gaze was steady. "But more people die when heroes decide they don't need rules, when they think their judgment is enough. I've seen it. I've cleaned up after it." Ben wanted to argue. Wanted to point out that he'd operated just fine without a commission breathing down his neck. That he'd saved entire planets without filing paperwork first. But looking at Aizawa's expression, at the weight behind those tired eyes, he got the sense this wasn't theoretical for the hero. This was lived experience. Scars earned from watching the system fail, and watching individuals fail, and trying to find a balance between the two. "They don't understand you," Aizawa continued. "But you don't understand them either. This isn't your world. Your rules don't apply here. So I should just follow theirs. You should figure out whether fighting the system helps anyone or just makes you feel righteous." The words hit harder than Ben expected. He opened his mouth to respond, found he didn't have one, and closed it again. Aizawa turned to leave. "Hey," Ben said. The hero paused. "What would you do if you were me?" Aizawa was quiet for a moment. "I'd cooperate. Play by their rules long enough to understand the game. Then decide whether it's worth changing." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got." Aizawa left. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded a lot louder than it should have. Ben stood in the center of the room and looked around. White walls, recessed lighting, window that showed a city view that was too perfect to be real. He walked to the desk, found a tablet waiting their screen, showing a welcome message and a menu of educational materials. Hero Society, an overview. Quirk Law and You. Understanding the Hero Public Safety Commission. Propaganda dressed up as information. Ben picked up the tablet anyway and started reading. Not because he believed it, but because knowing what they wanted him to believe was useful. 3 hours later, he'd gone through most of the material. It painted a picture of a society that had adapted to living with superpowers through careful regulation and systematic control. Heroes were professionals. Villains were criminals. Everything had a category, a procedure, a protocol. It was neat, organized, efficient. It was also suffocating. Ben set the tablet down and stared at the fake window. Somewhere out there beyond the sterile walls and the careful bureaucracy, the real city was functioning. People were living. Problems were happening. And he was stuck in a room waiting for permission to help. The ultimatrix pulsed. He looked at it. Green light steady against his wrist. No damage from the dimensional transit. No interference from whatever technology they were using to monitor him. They'd talked about it during the meeting. Asked technical questions, he'd deflected. Wanted to know how it worked, what its limits were, whether it could be removed. He'd seen the calculation in their eyes when he'd said no to that last one. Seen them trying to figure out whether he was an asset or a liability. Provisional asset, he thought, remembering the document Tanaka had shown him. Pending compliance. Not a hero, not a threat. Just a variable they hadn't categorized yet. Ben stood and started pacing. Small room, not much space. But moving helped him think. He could refuse, walk out, transform into something fast or intangible, and just leave. Find another part of this world where their commission didn't reach and operate independently. But that would make him a criminal in their eyes, a vigilante, someone to be hunted and contained. Or he could sign their framework, play by their rules, operate under their oversight, and wait for an opportunity to get home. That would make him complicit in a system he fundamentally disagreed with. Both options felt wrong. Ben stopped pacing and looked at his reflection in the fake window. 16 years old. Worn jacket, tired eyes. The ultimatrix, a constant weight on his wrist. He'd been in worse situations, fought bigger threats, survived impossible odds. But this was different. This wasn't a fight he could punch his way out of. This was a system designed to make individuals irrelevant, to subsume personal judgment under collective authority. And the worst part was, it worked. The city out there functioned. People were safe mostly. Heroes operated efficiently. The machine ran smoothly. But it was still a machine, and machines didn't care about individual lives when they conflicted with optimal functioning. Ben's hand went to the ultimatrix. He could feel the power humming beneath the interface. 63 aliens each with abilities that defied this world's understanding of possible. Each one a tool he'd used to save lives across multiple planets and timelines. They wanted him to register all of them, catalog them, make them predictable and controllable. He thought about feedback, about echo, about atomix and way big and all the forms that could level cities if he wanted them to. They should be afraid, he realized. They should be terrified of what he could do. The fact that they weren't, that they thought paperwork and protocols could contain him, meant either they were dangerously naive or dangerously confident. He suspected it was the latter. A soft tone sounded. The door's speaker crackled to life. "Mr. Tennyson," came Tanaka's voice. "Dinner will be delivered in 15 minutes. Please acknowledge." Ben walked to the speaker and pressed the response button. Acknowledged? The speaker went silent. He returned to the desk and picked up the tablet again, scrolled through the educational materials until he found what he was looking for. A section on hero rankings, on public perception, on how society measured and valued its protectors. It was all metrics, performance scores, rescue statistics, villain apprehension rates, media favorability indexes, heroes as products, heroism as a marketable commodity. Ben set the tablet down harder than he meant to. The screen flickered but didn't crack. This world had taken something that should be simple saving people and turned it into a bureaucratic nightmare wrapped in corporate branding. And they wanted him to participate. The door chimed. Ben opened it to find a tray of food waiting on a cart. No delivery person visible, just the meal and a small card that read, "Compliments of the HPSC." He took the tray inside and ate mechanically. The food was decent. Probably better than decent. but it tasted like obligation. When he finished, he set the tray outside and returned to the desk. The tablet had received a new notification. A message from Director Miyazaki. "Mr. Tennyson, I hope you've had time to consider our conversation. The framework we discussed is designed for your protection as much as public safety. We understand this is an adjustment. Please let us know if you have questions or concerns. We're here to help. Regards, Director Miyazaki." Ben read it twice. The tone was warm, supportive, completely empty of genuine concern. They didn't care about him. They cared about controlling him, about making sure his power fit their system instead of disrupting it. He opened a new message and started typing a response. Stopped, deleted it, started again. After the fifth attempt, he gave up and closed the tablet. He needed more information about this world, about what existed beyond the Commission's reach, about whether there was anyone here who operated outside the system successfully. Because if he was going to make a decision, he needed to understand all his options, not just the ones they were offering. Ben lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling. White, smooth, featureless. Somewhere above him, the city continued its careful dance of regulated heroism and controlled chaos. People lived and worked and relied on a system that promised safety in exchange for oversight. And tomorrow he'd have to decide whether to join them or stand apart. Neither choice felt like winning. The ultimatrix pulsed against his wrist. Steady, reliable, his. Whatever happened next, whatever he decided, that wouldn't change. He was still Ben Tennyson, still had the power to help people, still had the judgment to know when rules mattered less than results. The Commission could offer their framework, could explain their necessity, could make their case for why individual choice had to bow to collective control. But they couldn't make him believe it. And they definitely couldn't make him comply if he decided the cost was too high. Ben closed his eyes and let the steady pulse of the ultimatrix lull him toward sleep. Tomorrow he'd start figuring out what this world was really like beneath its polished surface. Tonight he'd rest and plan. Ben spent 2 days being cooperative. He attended the orientation sessions, nodded through presentations about quirk law and hero protocol, answered questions about the ultimatrix with just enough detail to seem forthcoming without giving them anything useful, ate their meals, slept in their quarters, played the part of someone adjusting to a new world. And every night he studied. The tablet they'd given him had restrictions, but restrictions were just puzzles waiting to be solved. Ben didn't hack it exactly. He just found the gaps. Educational materials linked to news archives. News archives mentioned case numbers. Case numbers led to public records. Public records had footnotes that referenced things they probably shouldn't have. 3 layers deep, and the clean narrative started showing cracks. Quirk-related crimes had specific reporting requirements, timelines, procedures, mandatory investigations. Except some cases didn't follow those timelines. Some investigations ended with a single word stamped across the file. Sealed. Not closed. Not resolved. Sealed. Ben made a list, cross-referenced dates and locations, found patterns that shouldn't exist if the system was working the way Miyazaki claimed. District 7, where he'd arrived, had 3 sealed cases in the past month alone, all involving quirk malfunctions, all resolved within 48 hours, all sealed by the same authorization code, HPSC Override Priority Classification. He stared at that phrase for a long time. On the 3rd morning, Administrator Tanaka visited with another stack of documents. More framework provisions, more clauses about cooperation and oversight. Director Miyazaki hopes you've had time to consider our offer, Tanaka said. His tone suggested this wasn't really a hope so much as an expectation. Still thinking? Ben said. The offer has a time limit. We can't maintain your provisional status indefinitely. How long? 48 hours. Tanaka set the documents on the desk. After that, we'll need a decision. Cooperation or deportation? Deportation to where you said I don't exist in your records. We'll find somewhere, Tanaka said, which wasn't an answer at all. He left. Ben waited 30 seconds, then picked up the documents and pretended to read them. The cameras in the room were subtle, but they were there. In the light fixtures, the ventilation grate. Probably the fake window, too. They were watching. They were always watching. That was fine. Let them watch him comply. At 1300 hours, a minor alarm went off somewhere in the building. Not emergency level. Just enough to pull attention. Probably a drill. The HPSC ran them twice a week, according to the orientation materials. Ben transformed. Gray matter was small. 4 inches tall with an oversized brain and the kind of intelligence that made quantum physics look like basic arithmetic. The transformation took 2 seconds. The camera feeds would show a flash of green light, then nothing. By the time anyone reviewed the footage, he'd be long gone. He slipped through the ventilation grate and into the ductwork. The building's layout had been in one of those educational materials. Fire safety procedures, emergency exits, structural diagrams labeled as helpful orientation tools. They'd basically given him a map. Gray matter's brain processed it all in seconds. Optimal route, minimal exposure, 3 access points that bypassed the main security checkpoints. He moved through the ducts like water, silent, efficient. The enhanced cognition let him track guard rotations, camera angles, and sensor placements simultaneously. Every variable calculated, every risk assessed. The ultimatrix beeped softly. 5 minutes left. He dropped out of the ventilation system in a storage area 2 floors below his quarters. Transformed back to human, walked to the service exit like he belonged there. A janitor passed him in the hallway, nodded, kept moving. Ben nodded back and kept walking. Outside, the city was different than he'd seen through the transport windows. Louder, more chaotic. People moved with the kind of purpose that came from living in a place where superpowers were common enough to be boring. He checked the ultimatrix. The tracker Tanaka had mentioned, the one they'd tried to install during his first night, was outputting a signal. Ben had rerouted it through the building's own security network during his gray matter excursion. As far as their systems knew, he was still in his quarters. That bought him maybe 6 hours before someone checked physically. He'd make them count. The address he'd pulled from the sealed files was in District 12. Industrial zone. Lots of warehouses, shipping facilities, and businesses that operated on the edge of legal. The kind of place where people minded their own business because everyone had something to hide. Ben took the train, kept his head down. The ultimatrix was covered by his jacket sleeve, and without actively transforming, he looked like any other teenager navigating the city. The warehouse district was exactly what he'd expected. Gray buildings, minimal signage. Streets that were clean enough to avoid official attention, but not clean enough to invite it. A functional kind of neglect. He found the address from the sealed file. Warehouse 47C. The door was locked, but the lock was cheap. Ben transformed into 4 arms. For exactly 3 seconds, ripped the door off its hinges with one hand, and transformed back before anyone could notice. Inside was darkness and the smell of disinfectant trying to cover something organic. Ben pulled out his phone, used the flashlight. The beam cut through the dark, and found empty space. Concrete floors. Metal shelving stripped bare. Nothing that would explain why this location appeared in 3 separate sealed investigations. Almost nothing. He swept the light across the floor again. Saw scratches in the concrete. Deep ones, like something heavy had been dragged repeatedly. The pattern led to a section of floor that didn't quite match the rest. Ben knelt and ran his fingers along the seam. Hidden hatch. Crude but effective. He pulled it open and found stairs leading down. The ultimatrix flashed yellow. Low charge. He'd been transforming too much. But going down there as a human felt monumentally stupid. So Ben cycled through his options and picked Echo. The transformation rippled through him. Smaller body, sound-based physiology, and the ability to duplicate himself if things went wrong. Not his strongest form, but versatile enough for reconnaissance. He descended. The basement was larger than the warehouse above, much larger. Someone had excavated beneath multiple buildings, creating a space that shouldn't exist according to any official blueprint. Equipment lined the walls, medical grade. Some of it still had serial numbers visible. Ben's enhanced hearing picked up the hum of refrigeration units running somewhere in the back. He moved deeper. The cold storage units were labeled, not with names, with designations. Sample A through Sample R. 18 units total. Most were empty now, unplugged, but 3 still ran. Ben opened the first one. Inside were vials, dozens of them, clear liquid with a faint golden tinge. Each one labeled with a quirk designation and a suppression percentage. 80%, 90%. Complete nullification. He closed that unit and opened the second. More vials. These ones were different. Red instead of gold. The labels read, Trigger Enhancement, and had dosage instructions that included warnings about cardiac failure and neural damage. The third unit was the worst. Tissue samples. Carefully preserved. Each one tagged with a number instead of a name and a quirk classification. Some were recent enough that the collection dates were from last week. Ben's hand clenched on the unit door. His sound-based body made the metal groan. This wasn't just black market operation. This was systematic, industrial. Someone was harvesting quirk factors like they were natural resources. He heard footsteps above, multiple sets, moving with purpose. Not warehouse workers. The rhythm was too precise, too trained. Ben closed the storage unit and moved to cover. The basement had support pillars, shadows, and enough ambient noise from the refrigeration units to mask his position if he was careful. The footsteps descended. 3 people. 2 in tactical gear, 1 in a long coat that looked more expensive than practical. The tactical officers carried weapons that looked designed to handle quirk users. The one in the coat carried a tablet and the kind of posture that said, Management. Shipment's late, the coat said. His voice was flat, irritated but controlled. Our buyer in Hosu is getting impatient. Supply chain issue, one of the tactical officers replied. The commission's been tightening security after that incident in District 7. The anomaly. Yeah, unknown quirk user. They're running him through processing now. Ben stayed perfectly still. Let them talk. Let them think they were alone. The coat walked to one of the workstations and pulled up something on the screen there. What's the status on the Eri project? Chisaki's keeping her secured. Production continues. We're at 60% capacity, but that should increase once he finalizes the refinement process. Eri. A name. Finally, something specific. And the commission? The coat asked, looking the other way as usual. As long as we keep it contained and don't cause public incidents, they're content to let it run. The coat nodded. Set down the tablet. Triple-check the security. If the anomaly caused this much disruption just by existing, we can't afford attention right now. They left the way they came, footsteps receding, door closing above. Ben waited 5 minutes before moving. Made sure they weren't coming back. Then he pulled out his phone and started documenting everything. Photos of the storage units, photos of the equipment, photos of the labels with their percentages and designations. Evidence. Proof that something was happening here that the Commission either didn't know about or chose to ignore. He climbed back up the stairs, transformed to human, and left through the broken door. No point hiding his presence now. They'd know someone had been here. Better to let them wonder who and why. Outside, the city continued functioning. Cars passed, people walked, everything normal. Ben checked the time. 3 hours since he'd left the facility. 3 hours before someone would check his quarters and find him gone. He needed to move. But first, he needed to understand what he'd just seen. The vials. The tissue samples. The casual mention of someone named Ari being kept secured for production purposes. Production of what, those suppression vials, the enhancement triggers? He found a quiet corner behind a shipping container and pulled up the photos on his phone. Zoomed in on the labels. Cross-referenced them against what little he knew about quirks from the educational materials. The pattern became clear after the third photo. They weren't just suppressing quirks. They were weaponizing the concept of suppression itself. Turning the ability to nullify powers into a commodity that could be bought and sold. And someone named Chisaki was at the center of it. Ben's jaw tightened. He thought about the Commission, about Miyazaki's carefully neutral tone, about how they'd framed everything as necessary regulation and public safety. If they knew about this and were looking the other way, then the system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed. Just not for everyone. And if they didn't know then, their vaunted oversight was worthless. Either way, people were being hurt, used, reduced to resources in a supply chain that shouldn't exist. The ultimatrix pulsed against his wrist. Steady green. Recharged enough for another transformation if he needed it. Ben looked at the warehouse district, at the empty streets and deliberate neglect, at the infrastructure that let places like Warehouse 47C operate without official notice. He thought about what Aizawa had said, about cooperating, playing by the rules long enough to understand the game. Well, he understood now. The game was rigged. The rules protected some people while sacrificing others. And cooperation meant accepting that as the cost of order. Ben had never been good at accepting costs like that. He checked his phone one more time, pulled up the map of the city, found the location that kept appearing in connection with Chisaki's name in the files he'd cross-referenced earlier. An office building in District 8. Registered to a company called Shihasekai. Listed as a community outreach organization focused on quirk counseling and support. The kind of front that looked legitimate on paper and probably had all the right permits and licenses and HPSC stamps of approval. Ben memorized the address. Then he started walking back toward the HPSC facility. He'd return to his quarters, let them think their surveillance worked, let them believe he was still considering their framework offer. But he wasn't considering anything anymore. He'd made his decision. They could keep their provisional status and their oversight and their regulations. He didn't need permission to do what was right. He'd never needed it before, and he wasn't starting now. Somewhere in this city, someone named Ari was being kept secured for production purposes. Someone named Chisaki was running an operation that treated quirks like natural resources to be harvested. And the system that claimed to protect everyone was either complicit or incompetent. Ben had dealt with both types before. The method was always the same. Find the people being hurt. Get them somewhere safe. Tear down whatever structure was enabling the harm. The commission wouldn't like it. They'd call it vigilantism, unauthorized intervention, operating outside the framework. They could call it whatever they wanted. Ben reached the HPSC building and used the same service entrance he'd left through. Slipped back into the ventilation system as gray matter. Returned to his quarters through the path he'd mapped earlier. The ultimatrix flashed red as he transformed back to human. Overused. He'd need to be more careful with the transformations going forward. He lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Tried to look like someone who'd spent the last few hours reading about hero society and considering his options. The camera in the light fixture watched, recorded, saw nothing suspicious. Ben closed his eyes and reviewed the photos in his mind. The vials, the tissue samples, the casual conversation about keeping someone secured for production. Tomorrow, Tanaka would come back with his 48-hour deadline. Miyazaki would expect an answer about the framework. Ben would give them one, just not the one they wanted. He thought about the warehouse, about the evidence he'd gathered, about whether showing it to them would change anything or just get him classified as a bigger threat. Probably the latter. Systems didn't reform themselves from internal pressure. They either adapted when forced by external circumstances or collapsed under their own weight. Ben had never been patient enough to wait for collapse. The ultimatrix pulsed against his wrist. Ready. Waiting, 63 aliens with abilities this world hadn't categorized yet and couldn't control. They'd been right to be concerned about him. They just hadn't been concerned enough. Ben opened his eyes and looked at the fake window. The city beyond it continued its careful performance of order and safety. Heroes patrolled. Villains were contained. Everything functioned according to protocol. But underneath that performance, in places like Warehouse 47C and wherever Shigaraki operated, different rules applied. Rules that turned people into resources. Rules that made suffering acceptable as long as it stayed hidden. He'd seen enough of those rules across multiple planets and timelines. He'd broken most of them. This world wouldn't be any different. Ben rolled onto his side and let himself drift towards something resembling rest. Not sleep. He couldn't afford to actually sleep. Not when he knew what he knew now, but rest, enough to recover, enough to prepare. Tomorrow he'd tell them what they wanted to hear. Buy time, gather more information, and then when he had everything he needed, he'd do what he always did. Save the people who needed saving. Whether the system approved or not, Ben returned to his quarters at 0400 hours. Slipped back through the ventilation system. Transformed to human. Lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling until morning came. At 800, Tanaka arrived with breakfast and the same expectant expression. "Director Miyazaki would like your answer by this afternoon," he said. "I'll have one," Ben replied. Tanaka left. Ben ate mechanically and spent the morning reviewing everything he'd learned about Shigaraki. Community outreach, quirk counseling, licensed and approved by every relevant authority. The kind of organization that looked pristine on paper and probably passed every inspection with perfect scores. But inspections only checked what they were told to check. At 1300 hours, Ben told the guard outside his door that he needed to use the facility gym. Standard request. Part of maintaining physical readiness while in provisional custody. The guard approved it. Why wouldn't he? Ben had been cooperative for 3 days. Model detainee. The gym was on sub-level 2. Ben worked out for exactly 20 minutes, long enough to establish a pattern. Then he used the locker room shower. Transformed into Ghost Freak while the water ran. Intangibility had advantages. He phased through 3 walls, 2 security checkpoints, and the building's outer perimeter without triggering a single alarm. Ghost Freak's physiology didn't register on motion sensors, didn't show up on thermal imaging, didn't interact with the physical world unless he chose to. By the time anyone checked on him, he'd be in District 8. The address he'd memorized led to a medical office building, 5 stories, modern architecture, glass and steel that reflected the afternoon sun in ways that made it hard to look at directly. A sign near the entrance listed the tenants: dental offices, optometry, physical therapy, and on the 4th floor, Shigaraki Community Services. Ben circled the building once as a human, noted the security cameras, the badge access doors, the discreet presence of guards who didn't wear uniforms but had the bearing and positioning of professional security. Too much protection for a counseling service. He found a blind spot in the camera coverage and transformed. Gray matter this time, 4 inches tall, enhanced intellect, perfect for finding ways into places that didn't want visitors. The ventilation system was standard. Ben had memorized building codes during his first night in HPSC custody. Every structure above 3 stories needed emergency air circulation with accessible maintenance panels. He found one, picked the lock with a piece of wire bent at precise angles his enhanced brain calculated in seconds. Slipped inside. The ductwork branched like arteries. Ben followed the path that led to the 4th floor. Listened for voices, for activity, for any sign of where they'd keep something they wanted hidden. 2 floors up, he heard it. Not voices, machinery. The distinct hum of medical equipment running continuously. Refrigeration, climate control. The kind of setup that required power and monitoring. He followed the sound. The vent opened into a hallway. White walls, white floor. Lighting that was too bright and too cold. 3 people in medical scrubs moved past, talking in low voices about injection schedules and recovery times. Ben waited until they passed, then dropped out of the vent and transformed back to human in a storage closet. Regular size, more options. The hallway extended in both directions. Doors lined both sides, each one marked with a number and nothing else. No names, no designations, just numbers. Clinical, impersonal, designed to process rather than care. Ben moved quietly, checked doors. Most were offices. One was a break room. Another held filing cabinets full of paperwork that would take hours to review properly. He didn't have hours. At the end of the hallway, a door different from the others, heavier, reinforced. The kind that required both a key card and a code to open. Ben looked at it for 5 seconds, considering his options. Then he transformed into Ghost Freak and phased through. The room beyond was larger than expected. Not a cell. Not quite a laboratory. Something in between. Medical equipment lined one wall. Monitors displayed data in graphs and charts that tracked something Ben didn't immediately understand. A bed sat in the center, surrounded by machines that hummed with the same sound he'd followed here. And on the bed, a child. Small. Maybe 6 years old. White hair that looked drained of color rather than naturally light. Her arms were covered in bandages that someone had changed recently. An IV line ran to her hand. Monitors tracked her vitals with steady mechanical precision. She was asleep, or sedated. Ben couldn't tell which. He transformed back to human slowly, quietly. Didn't want to startle her if she woke. The monitors continued their steady beeping. The machines continued their humming. Everything functioning exactly as designed. Ben walked closer, saw the medical chart clipped to the end of the bed. reached for it with hands that wanted to shake but didn't. Subject E7. Quirk classification rewind. Status active production. Collection schedule daily. Recovery time 4 to 6 hours. Notes: increased dosage if resistance develops. He read it twice. Made sure he understood. They were using her. Taking something from her body regularly enough to need recovery time. Monitoring her like she was equipment. Subject E7. Not a name, a designation. Ben's hand clenched on the chart. The paper crumpled. He set it down carefully before he tore it apart. The girl stirred. Her eyes opened. Gray, tired. The kind of tired that came from more than just lack of sleep. She looked at him without surprise, without fear, just a dull acceptance that someone else had come into the room. Ben knelt, dropped to her eye level, made himself smaller, less threatening. "Hey," he said. His voice came out quieter than intended. "My name's Ben." She didn't respond, just watched him with those exhausted gray eyes. "I'm going to get you out of here," Ben said. "Okay, that's why I came. To get you somewhere safe." Still no response. Like she'd heard promises before and learned not to believe them, Ben reached for the IV line, started to disconnect it. "I wouldn't do that." The voice came from the doorway. Calm, clinical. The same tone someone might use to discuss weather. Ben turned. The man standing there wore a long coat over medical scrubs, dark hair, a mask that covered the lower half of his face, gloves that looked more surgical than protective. His posture was controlled, deliberate, not aggressive, but ready. "The sedation needs to be reduced gradually," the man continued. "Stopping it abruptly could cause complications." "You're Chisaki," Ben said. Not a question. "Kai Chisaki, and you're the anomaly from District 7. Chisaki's eyes moved to the Ultimatrix, then back to Ben's face. "The one the Commission has been struggling to classify. Not struggling anymore." Ben stood but kept himself between Chisaki and the girl. "Pretty clear what I am now. A vigilante." Chisaki said it like he was stating a fact, not making a judgment. "Operating without authorization. Breaking into private property. Attempting to abduct a patient." "Patient," Ben repeated. "That what you call her? She's receiving treatment. For what? A quirk that's dangerous to herself and others. We're developing methods to manage it safely." Ben looked at the chart again, at the words active production and collection schedule. "You're not treating her. You're using her." "I'm doing what's necessary," Chisaki said. His tone didn't change, didn't harden or soften, just remained perfectly level. "The current system is broken. Heroes exist because quirks exist. Remove the quirks, remove the need for heroes, remove the chaos. By experimenting on a kid, by developing a solution that will save thousands, millions eventually." Chisaki took a step into the room. His hands stayed visible, non-threatening. "You come from another world, different rules, but surely you understand cost-benefit analysis. One individual's discomfort versus societal transformation." "She's not an individual's discomfort," Ben said. "She's a person whose quirk could rewrite reality if left uncontrolled." Chisaki gestured to the monitors. "We're keeping her stable, safe, productive. Without our intervention, she'd be a danger to everyone around her." Ben's jaw tightened. The argument was familiar. Different words, same logic. The Forever Knights had used it. The High Breed had used it. Every villain who thought they were fixing something broken said the same thing. The ends justify the means. The individual doesn't matter as much as the collective. Sacrifice the few to save the many. It was always a lie. "I'm taking her," Ben said. "You can't." "Watch me." Ben reached for the ultimatrix. Chisaki's hand moved faster, touching the floor. The ground erupted. Not exploded. Erupted. Like the concrete had suddenly decided to become something else. Spikes shot up between Ben and the bed. Walls formed in seconds. The room restructured itself with Chisaki at the center, controlling every change. Ben rolled aside as a pillar tried to catch him. Slapped the ultimatrix. Diamond Head locked in. The transformation rippled through him. Crystalline body, enhanced durability, the ability to generate and manipulate crystal structures. He generated a shield as Chisaki reshaped the walls into crushing mechanisms. The crystal held, barely. "Impressive," Chisaki said. His voice echoed through the restructured room. "But you're in my space. Every surface here is mine to control." He was right. The floor, walls, ceiling, all of it responded to his touch. Chisaki could reshape the entire room with a gesture. But Ben wasn't trying to win a fight. He was trying to get to the girl. Diamond Head launched crystal shards at Chisaki. Not to harm, just to force him to defend. To divide his attention. While Chisaki restructured the floor to block the projectiles, Ben generated a crystal path directly to the bed. He ran. Chisaki caught on fast. Walls rose to block him. Ben smashed through them, generated new crystal structures to compensate for what Chisaki destroyed. The room became a battlefield of competing geometries. Ben reached the bed, scooped up the girl with one arm. She weighed almost nothing. "You're making a mistake," Chisaki said. "It's mine to make." Ben generated a crystal dome around himself and the girl, thick enough to buy seconds. Not minutes, but seconds would work. He looked at the ultimatrix, cycled through options, needed something fast, something that could phase through walls. Ghost Freak locked in. The transformation took 2 seconds. The crystal dome shattered as Chisaki reshaped it from the outside. But by then, Ben was already intangible, passing through the floor with the girl held securely. Ghost Freak's physiology let him carry others when he phased. One of the form's more useful features. He dropped through 3 floors, hearing Chisaki's frustrated shout above. Ground level. Ben solidified in a storage room, transformed back to human. Checked the girl. She was awake now, staring at him with those gray, tired eyes. Still no fear, just confusion. "It's okay," Ben said. "We're leaving." Alarm started. Loud, immediate, right. Chisaki would have triggered them the moment Ben took the girl. Ben ran, held the girl against his chest, found the nearest exit, and kicked the door open. Emergency exit. Led to an alley. Guards were already responding. Ben counted 4, all moving with professional precision, all carrying weapons designed for quirk users. He couldn't fight them. Not while holding a child who'd been sedated and used as a resource for who knows how long. Ben cycled the ultimatrix. XLR8 locked in. Speed solved most problems. He transformed. The world slowed. Guards became statues. The alley became a corridor of frozen time. Ben ran past them before they could process what they'd seen. Hit the street at a speed that made everything blur. 3 blocks, 5 blocks, 10 blocks. Distance between them and Chisaki's facility. The transformation timed out in an alley behind a restaurant. Ben stumbled, caught himself, checked the girl again. She was staring at him, really staring now, like she was trying to figure out if he was real. "You okay?" Ben asked. She nodded, small, hesitant. "Good. That's good." Ben looked around. Needed somewhere safe. Somewhere Chisaki couldn't reach. Somewhere the commission couldn't ignore. He pulled out his phone. No service. They'd blocked him remotely. Of course they had. Ben cursed under his breath, looked at the girl. "Can you walk?" Another small nod. "Okay, stay close." He led her out of the alley. The street was busy enough to provide cover. People moved past without paying much attention. Just another teenager with a kid, sister, or cousin. Nothing suspicious. Ben's mind raced through options. He couldn't go back to HPSC custody. They'd take the girl and return her to Chisaki or somewhere equally bad. Couldn't hide indefinitely in a city where he had no resources and no allies. Needed someone who'd listen, who had authority, who might actually care about a kid being used as a resource. Aizawa's face came to mind. The hero hadn't agreed with Ben. But he hadn't dismissed him either. Had talked about balance, about understanding, about the difference between breaking rules to feel righteous and breaking rules to help. This definitely qualified as helping. Ben found a payphone, ancient technology but functional, called the HPSC main number. Asked for Aizawa. "He's not available," the operator said. "Tell him Ben Tennyson called. Tell him I have proof the commission needs to see. Tell him I met..." The operator hung up. Ben cursed again. Tried a different approach, called emergency services. "I need to report child endangerment," he said when someone answered. Active abuse situation. Medical experimentation. They took the report, asked for his location. Ben gave them an address 3 blocks away, hung up before they could ask more questions. Not perfect, but it would trigger a response. Get people asking questions, make it harder for Chisaki to operate in silence. The girl tugged on his sleeve. Ben looked down. She pointed to a small park across the street. A bench, relatively open, hard to ambush. "Yeah," Ben said. "Good idea." They crossed. Sat on the bench. Ben kept scanning the street for guards or commission agents or anyone who might be looking for them. The girl pulled her knees up to her chest, made herself smaller. The bandages on her arms were visible now. Recent wounds. Regular wounds. The kind that came from repeated procedures. "What's your name?" Ben asked. She looked at him. Didn't answer immediately, like she was testing whether the question was safe. "Eri," she said finally. Voice quiet. Barely audible. "Eri." Ben repeated it. Not subject E7. Not a designation. A name. "That's a good name." She didn't respond. Just watched the street with the same exhausted wariness. Ben's phone vibrated. Not a call. A message from an unknown number. "You have something that belongs to me." Chisaki. Probably tracking Ben through cell tower triangulation. Ben typed back. "She's not property." The response came instantly. "She's dangerous." "You don't understand what you've taken." Ben, then explain it to someone who can help her, not use her. No response after that. Either Chisaki was done talking or planning his next move. Ben pocketed the phone, looked at Eri. "People are coming, good people. They're going to help." She shook her head, small, definitive. "They will," Ben insisted. "I promise." Eri looked at him with those gray eyes. Everyone says that. The words hit harder than any of Chisaki's restructured attacks. Ben wanted to argue. wanted to promise that this time would be different, that the system would work, that someone would care enough to act. But he couldn't, because he'd seen the warehouse, seen the files, seen how the commission prioritized order over justice. If he handed Eri over to official channels, there was a real chance she'd end up right back with Chisaki, or somewhere similar. Somewhere with the right permits and licenses and HPSC approval. Somewhere that treated her like a resource instead of a person. Ben's hand clenched. The ultimatrix pulsed against his wrist. He'd broken their rules, operated without authorization, taken a child from a licensed facility. They'd call it kidnapping, vigilantism, proof that he couldn't be trusted with freedom. And they'd be right to worry, because Ben had no intention of playing by rules that let places like Chisaki's operation exist. Sirens approached. Multiple vehicles. Ben tensed. But they weren't coming for him. They were heading toward Hasakai's building, the emergency report he'd called in. Someone was responding. Whether they'd actually investigate or just accept whatever explanation Chisaki provided was another question. Ben stood. Come on. We need to keep moving. Eri slid off the bench. Her hand caught his sleeve again, holding on like she expected him to disappear. I'm not leaving you, Ben said. I promise. Whatever happens next, I'm not leaving you. She nodded, still cautious, still wary. They walked. Ben kept to crowded streets, kept moving, kept thinking through scenarios. He needed allies. Needed people who'd stand between Eri and the system that had failed her. But everyone here operated within that system. Everyone had licenses and regulations and oversight. Everyone except him. His phone vibrated again. Different number. This time he recognized it. Aizawa. Ben answered. Yeah. Where are you? Aizawa's voice was quiet. Controlled, but urgent. Does it matter? You broke into a licensed medical facility, assaulted staff, abducted a patient in active treatment. That what they're calling it? Ben's voice stayed level. Treatment. What else would you call it? Exploitation. She's 6 years old, and they were harvesting her quirk like it was a natural resource. Silence on the other end. Long enough that Ben thought the connection had dropped. Can you prove that? Aizawa asked finally. I have evidence. Photos, documentation, and I have her. Ben looked at Eri. Look at her arms and tell me that's treatment. More silence. The commission wants you detained, Aizawa said. Immediately. They're calling you a clear threat to public safety. Of course they are. But I'm not calling it in yet. Ben stopped walking. Why not? Because I've seen Hasakai's facility, personally. As part of a routine inspection 6 months ago, everything was clean. Everything passed. But something felt wrong. Aizawa's voice carried weight. History. If you have evidence that proves what I suspected, I need to see it. Where? Old Industrial District, Building 7J, 20 minutes. Come alone. I have the girl. Bring her. If she's hurt, she needs medical attention. Real medical attention. The line went dead. Ben looked at Eri. One more stop. Then we figure out what comes next. She nodded, still holding his sleeve. They walked toward the industrial district. Ben kept scanning for threats, for guards, for any sign this was a trap. But Aizawa had sounded genuine, and more importantly, he'd admitted to suspicions about Chisaki's operation. That counted for something. The industrial district was quiet. Most buildings were abandoned or converted to storage. Building 7J was near the edge, isolated enough to avoid casual observation. Aizawa was waiting outside. No backup. No restraints visible. Just the hero in his usual tired-looking outfit, capture weapon draped around his neck. He looked at Ben, then at Eri. His expression didn't change much, but something in his eyes shifted. "Show me," Aizawa said. Ben pulled out his phone. Showed him the photos from the warehouse, the vials, the tissue samples, the documentation about Eri's production schedule. Aizawa studied each image carefully. His jaw tightened with each one. "This is real," he said finally. Not a question. "Yeah. And the commission knows. They're either complicit or incompetent. Either way, she's not safe going through official channels." Aizawa looked at Eri again, knelt down slowly, made himself her height. "Hey," he said. His voice was softer than Ben had heard before. "Can you tell me your name?" "Eri," she whispered. "Eri, I'm Aizawa. I'm a pro-hero. Have people hurt you?" She nodded. For a long time, another nod. Aizawa stood, looked at Ben. "This is going to cause problems." "I know. Big problems. The kind that don't go away quietly." "I know," Ben repeated. "Good." Aizawa pulled out his phone. "Because you're going to need help." "From who?" "People who actually give a damn about kids more than they care about paperwork." Aizawa started typing. "It'll take time. But I know people who'll shelter her while we build a case that can't be ignored. The commission will try to shut this down. They'll call you a vigilante and her a runaway patient. They'll protect Chisaki because admitting they missed this means admitting the whole system failed." Aizawa met Ben's eyes. "You understand what you've started?" "Yeah," Ben looked at Eri. "But she needed someone to start it." Aizawa almost smiled. "You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid." "Probably both. Definitely both." Aizawa finished typing and pocketed his phone. "I've got someone who can take her. Off the books. Safe house that's actually safe. But you need to disappear for a while. Let this get complicated without you in the center." "Can't. They've got tracking on me." Aizawa studied the Ultimatrix. "Can you remove that?" "No, it's bonded to my DNA." "Then we'll have to work around it." Aizawa gestured toward the building. "Come on, we've got maybe an hour before someone tracks you here." They went inside. The building was empty except for some old furniture and equipment. Aizawa led them to a back room with windows that overlooked the entire district. "Wait here," he said. "My contact's coming. When she arrives, you give her the girl and you run. Don't stop. Don't transform where cameras can see you. Don't go back to HPSC custody. So I'm officially a fugitive. You're officially a complication they can't categorize." Aizawa looked at him seriously. "Which makes you dangerous. They'll come after you. Not to talk, to contain." Ben nodded. "Figured." Eri tugged his sleeve again. He looked down. She was staring at him with those tired gray eyes. "You're leaving," she said. "Just for a little bit. You're going with someone who will keep you safe. You promise—" Ben knelt, met her eyes. "I promise, and I keep my promises." She studied his face, looking for lies, for cracks, for any sign this was just another thing adults said and didn't mean. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her. She nodded. 15 minutes later, a woman arrived. Mid-30s, practical clothing, kind eyes, but hard posture. Someone who'd seen rough situations before. Aizawa vouched for her, explained the situation in brief clinical terms. She nodded, held out her hand to Eri. Eri looked at Ben. "It's okay," he said. "She's going to help." Eri took the woman's hand. They left through the back exit. Just two people walking. Nothing suspicious. Ben watched them go until they turned a corner. "She'll be safe," Aizawa said. "She better be." "She will be. Now you need to move. HPSC will have units converging on this area within the hour." Ben stood. Checked the ultimatrix. Still green. Still functional. "Thanks," he said, "for believing me." "Don't thank me yet," Aizawa replied. "This isn't over. It's barely started. The Commission will spin this. Media will run with whatever narrative they're given. You'll be labeled a threat. Maybe worse." "Yeah." Ben headed for the door. "But at least one kid won't be labeled a resource anymore." "That's worth something." "It's worth everything." Ben left. Transformed into XLR8 once he was clear of the building. Ran. The city blurred around him. Buildings became streaks. People became impressions. He moved too fast for cameras to track properly. Somewhere behind him, the machinery of authority was mobilizing. The Commission. The media. The system that couldn't afford to admit it had failed a child. They'd come for him. Call him a vigilante, a threat, a variable that needed to be contained. Let them. Ben had crossed the line now. Couldn't go back. Couldn't pretend the framework they'd offered was anything but chains, disguised as cooperation. He'd saved one person. That was all. One child who deserved better than being harvested for her quirk. But in doing so, he'd proven something the Commission couldn't tolerate. Their system could be defied. Their authority could be questioned. Their neat categories and protocols didn't apply to everyone. Ben was officially outside their framework now, and he had no intention of coming back in. The news broke at 600 hours. Ben was hiding in an abandoned subway maintenance tunnel when his phone started buzzing. Not calls. Messages. Dozens of them from numbers he didn't recognize. Links to news articles. Video clips. Social media threads that had exploded overnight. He opened one. "Unregistered Individual Assaults Licensed Medical Facility," the headline read. Below it, shaky footage from someone's phone showed Ben as 4 arms smashing through a wall. The angle made it look more violent than it had been. Made it look like destruction for its own sake rather than rescue. He scrolled. Found another article. "Mysterious quirk user abducts patient from treatment center." This one had quotes from Shigaraki's legal team. Phrases like "violent intrusion" and "endangered vulnerable individual" and "disregard for proper medical protocols." No mention of what the treatment actually involved. No mention of tissue samples or production schedules or a 6-year-old girl with bandages on her arms. Ben kept scrolling. Some outlets were more measured. Questions raised about District 8 facility. Authorities investigating claims of improper care. But those were buried under the louder voices, the ones with better footage and more dramatic framing. His phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. "You're trending. Congratulations." No signature. But Ben knew the tone. Chisaki. He didn't respond, just pocketed the phone and kept moving through the tunnel. The ultimatrix pulsed green against his wrist. Still functional, still tracked probably, but he'd been moving enough to make the signal hard to pin down. 3 hours of walking brought him to an access point in District 11. Industrial zone, lots of warehouses, easy to blend in if you looked like you belonged. Ben found a spot behind a shipping container and risked transforming. Gray matter. Quick scan of his surroundings. No immediate threats, no one watching. He transformed back and checked his phone again. The trending topics had shifted. Now people were arguing. Some called him a hero. Others called him dangerous. A few were demanding answers about Shigaraki's operations. Most were just repeating whatever narrative their preferred news source fed them. Ben scrolled past the noise and found something more concerning. An official statement from the Hero Public Safety Commission, HPSC, statement regarding unauthorized intervention in District 8. At approximately 1400 hours yesterday, an individual known to our office as a provisional asset under evaluation conducted an unsanctioned raid on a licensed medical facility. The individual whose identity we are withholding pending ongoing investigation removed a patient from active treatment without proper authority or medical clearance. The Commission takes all allegations of improper care seriously and has launched a full investigation into Shigaraki Community Services. However, we must stress that vigilante action, regardless of intent, undermines the systems put in place to protect public safety. The individual in question has been classified as a person of interest and is being sought for questioning. We urge them to surrender peacefully to proper authorities. The Commission remains committed to maintaining order and ensuring all powers registered or otherwise are exercised within appropriate legal frameworks. Ben read it twice. The language was careful, measured. They didn't call him a villain, didn't call him a criminal. Just a person of interest who'd undermined their systems. They were covering their bases, investigating Chisaki enough to look responsive while framing Ben as the real problem. Smart. Frustrating, but smart. His phone buzzed. A call this time, number he recognized. Ben answered. "Yeah, where are you?" Aizawa's voice was quiet. Background noise suggested he was outside somewhere public. "Moving. Stay that way. HPSC has mobilized response teams. They're not calling it a manhunt, but that's what it is." Figured. Ben shifted position, kept his eyes on the approach routes. "How's the girl?" "Safe. My contact moved her twice since yesterday. She's scared but physically stable." "Good." "Ben." Aizawa's tone shifted. "You need to understand what's happening. The Commission isn't just angry. They're threatened. You proved their system failed, that a licensed facility could operate that way under their watch. They can't admit that publicly. So they blame me instead. They blame the disruption, the unauthorized action, the variable they couldn't control." Aizawa paused. "They're not wrong that you broke rules, but they're not addressing why you had to." Ben leaned against the shipping container. "You think I should turn myself in?" "I think you should consider what happens if you don't. They'll escalate. Bring in heroes with capture-specific quirks. Make you into a threat that justifies whatever force they use." "And if I surrender?" "They'll process you, detain you, probably deport you to wherever they can claim jurisdiction. Eri will go back into the system, maybe not with Chisaki, but somewhere. Some other facility with the right paperwork. That's not acceptable." "I know." Aizawa's voice carried weight. "History, but I'm not sure what you think the alternative is. You can't fight an entire society's infrastructure." I can try. You can die trying, or worse, get people around you hurt. Aizawa let that sit. I'm not telling you to give up. I'm telling you to think past the next action. Plan. Build allies. Don't just react. The line went quiet for a moment. Ben heard city sounds in the background. Traffic, people. The normal functioning of a world that had classified him as a disruption. If you were my student, Aizawa said finally, I'd protect you. But you're not. And I have other students who need that protection more than you do right now. I get it. I doubt you do. But you will. Aizawa sighed. Stay mobile. Stay smart. And don't transform where cameras can catch you. They're already building a profile on your abilities. The call ended. Ben pocketed the phone and stared at the ultimatrix. Green, steady. 63 aliens who could do things this world had no framework for understanding. They wanted to categorize him, put him in a box, make him fit their system or remove him from it entirely. He'd been through this before. Different worlds, different systems, same fundamental problem. Power scared people. Uncontrolled power terrified them. And Ben was about as uncontrolled as it got. His phone buzzed again. Not a call, a notification. Someone had tagged him in a social media post. He opened it. The post was from a hero blogger, popular account, hundreds of thousands of followers. The content was a video analysis of Ben's transformations pieced together from security footage and phone cameras. Subject displays multiple distinct forms, each with unique physiological characteristics. Not consistent with any known quirk classification. Possible mutation type with extreme plasticity or something else entirely. Recommend HPSC prioritize containment and study. The comments below were worse. Some people were fascinated. Others were afraid. A few were calling for immediate action, permanent detention, neutralization if necessary. Ben closed the app. Didn't need to see more. He'd saved a kid. That was supposed to be simple. That was supposed to be the kind of thing everyone agreed was good. But nothing was simple when systems were involved. When institutions had reputations to protect. When admitting failure meant losing public trust. So they reframed the narrative. Made the rescue into an attack. Made the rescuer into a threat. And people believed it because people wanted to believe the system worked. Ben stood. Checked his surroundings one more time. Started moving. He had maybe 12 hours before they narrowed down his location. Less if he got unlucky. He needed supplies, information, a plan beyond just keep running. He found a convenience store. Small, old. The kind of place that barely had working cameras. Bought water and protein bars with cash he'd lifted from an ATM using Gray Matter's enhanced intellect to bypass the security. Not theft exactly. More like borrowing from a society that was trying to lock him up. The clerk didn't even look at him, just rang up the items and handed over the bag. Ben left, found another maintenance access. This one led to the water treatment system. Complicated enough to hide in, monitored enough to have power for charging his phone. He settled in and pulled up the news again. The story had shifted. Now they were running pieces about Shigaraki's history. The facility's licensing, its funding sources, who approved it, who inspected it. People were asking questions, the kind that made bureaucrats nervous. But they were also running pieces about Ben, about unregistered individuals, about the dangers of power without oversight, about what happens when someone decides rules don't apply to them. The narrative was splitting. Half the city saw him as a necessary correction to a broken system. The other half saw him as proof that the system needed more control, not less. Ben's phone buzzed. Another message from the unknown number. You've created quite the mess. Was one child worth destroying your future in this world, Chisaki? Still needling. Still trying to frame it as a cost-benefit analysis. Ben typed back, yes. The response came quickly. Interesting. Most people calculate differently. Self-preservation usually wins over abstract morality. Ben, she's not abstract. She's real. And she's not yours? No response after that. Ben set down the phone and leaned against the tunnel wall. The concrete was cold. The air smelled like chlorine and rust. He thought about Eri, about those gray, exhausted eyes, about the bandages on her arms, and the chart that called her Subject E7. Worth it. Had to be worth it. Even if it meant living in tunnels. Even if it meant being hunted. Even if it meant never getting home. Some choices weren't about calculation. They were about being able to live with yourself after. His phone buzzed again. Different number. This one he didn't recognize, but the message made him freeze. Meeting tonight, 2100 hours, Pier 23. Come alone. We know what happened. We can help. No signature. No explanation. Ben stared at it. Could be a trap. Probably was a trap. HPSC, trying to lure him to a controllable location. But it could also be genuine. Someone who'd seen the truth about Eri. Someone who actually cared about fixing broken systems instead of protecting them. He checked the time. 5 hours until the meeting. Enough to scout the location. Enough to plan an escape route. Ben pocketed the phone and started moving through the tunnels. He'd go. Carefully. Ready to run if it went bad. But he'd go. Because the alternative was staying in the dark and hoping things got better on their own. And Ben had never been good at hoping. The pier was in District 4. Industrial waterfront. Lots of shipping containers and heavy machinery. Good sight lines if you knew where to look. Easy ambush point if you didn't. Ben arrived an hour early, transformed into gray matter, and climbed to a high vantage point. Watched the area. Mapped the approaches. No obvious HPSC presence. No hero patrols. No surveillance teams that he could identify, just empty pier and dark water and the sound of waves against concrete. At 2055, someone arrived. Not Aizawa, not Chisaki, not anyone Ben recognized. A man in his 30s. Casual clothes, no hero costume, no commission uniform. He walked with the kind of confidence that came from not being afraid of this location. He stopped at the end of the pier and waited. Ben transformed back to human and approached carefully. Kept distance. Kept options open. You, Ben? The man asked. Depends who's asking. Someone who thinks the commission's full of shit. The man turned. His face was scarred. Old burns that had healed poorly. Name's Jiran. I'm a broker. Information, resources, connections. And you want to help me out of the goodness of your heart. I want to offer you options. Jiran pulled out a cigarette, but didn't light it. Just rolled it between his fingers. You've made yourself a problem for powerful people. That's dangerous. But it's also valuable. Ben's hand drifted toward the ultimatrix. Keep talking. There are people in this city who'd pay well for what you can do. People who aren't so hung up on licenses and oversight. People who get things done without asking permission. Villains. Entrepreneurs. Giran smiled. The difference is perspective. Not interested? Course not, you're a hero. Big damn hero who saves kids and pisses off bureaucrats. Garan's smile didn't fade. But heroes need resources too. Safe houses, information networks, people who can move things without official channels noticing. And what do you want in return? Favors, future considerations. Maybe you help with a problem. Maybe you look the other way on something. Nothing major, just business. Ben studied him. Garan wasn't lying, wasn't hiding what he was, just offering a deal that came with obvious strings. No, Ben said. Think about it first. I did. Answer's no. Garan shrugged, pocketed the cigarette. Your choice? But when the commission closes in, when the heroes come for you, when you're out of places to hide, remember? Bry offered. He walked away, casual, unhurried, like this had been expected. Ben watched him go and felt something cold settle in his chest. That was the play. That was how they'd frame him next. Not just a vigilante, a criminal. Someone working with villains, someone who couldn't be trusted. They'd create the narrative, even if it wasn't true. Plant evidence. Manufacture connections. Make him into exactly the kind of threat that justified overwhelming response. And people would believe it. Because people always believe the system over the individual. Ben turned and walked back toward the industrial district. He needed to move again. Change locations. Stay ahead of whatever was coming. His phone buzzed. Another news alert. HPSC upgrades unregistered individual to active threat status. Heroes authorized to use necessary force for apprehension. Necessary force. That meant quirks designed for capture, for suppression, for making sure the target didn't get away. They were done asking nicely. Ben checked the ultimatrix, calculated how many transformations he had before it needed to recharge, how long he could maintain forms under stress, what his actual options were against heroes who'd trained their entire lives for combat. The math wasn't good. He couldn't fight an entire hero society. Couldn't win against an infrastructure designed to contain people with powers. But he could be difficult to catch. Could be expensive to pursue. Could make them work hard enough that public opinion started asking questions about resource allocation. Not a winning strategy, just the best available option. Ben found another tunnel, settled in for a few hours of rest, not sleep, couldn't afford actual sleep. Just enough shutdown to recover. He thought about Eri. Wondered if she was really safe or if Aizawa's contact was already under pressure to give her up. Thought about the warehouse with its vials and tissue samples. About whether anyone was actually investigating or just filing reports that would get sealed. Thought about home, about his own Earth, where the plumbers weren't perfect, but at least tried to do right. Where saving people didn't make you a criminal. The ultimatrix pulsed against his wrist. Steady green, still his. Whatever happened next, he had that. Had power that didn't come with strings or oversight or bureaucratic approval. And he'd use it the same way he always had. For people who needed help and weren't getting it from anyone else. The commission could call that vigilantism. Could call it disruption. Could call it whatever made them feel better about their failure to protect a 6-year-old girl. Ben would call it doing the job nobody else would do. He closed his eyes and let himself drift toward something resembling rest. Tomorrow would be worse. The day after worse than that. They'd tighten the net. Bring in better hunters. Make it harder to move. But tonight, Eri was safe. And that had to count for something. Even if it only counted to him. The tunnel was quiet except for the sound of water moving through pipes. The city above continued functioning. people slept. Heroes patrolled. The system ground forward with mechanical precision. And somewhere in that system, Ben knew someone was deciding exactly how much force was necessary to contain him. He'd find out soon enough. But for now, he had a few hours of peace. He'd take them. They found him on the third day. Ben was moving through District 9, keeping to areas with enough people that a fight would be noticed, but not so crowded that civilians became shields. The balance was delicate. He'd been maintaining it for 72 hours on minimal sleep and stolen food. The Ultimatrix pulsed against his wrist. Low charge. He'd been transforming too frequently. The battery degraded faster under sustained combat stress. Needed to ration power better. He ducked into an alley to check his phone. No new messages from Aizawa. No updates on Eri. The silence bothered him more than threats would have. The attack came without warning. A net dropped from above, not ordinary rope. Something that sparked and hummed with energy. Ben rolled aside, but the net adjusted trajectory mid-air, spreading wider, falling faster than physics should allow. Someone's quirk. Controlling projectiles or trajectories or something. Ben slapped the Ultimatrix. XLR8 locked in. The transformation rippled through him. Blue scales. Aerodynamic build. Speed that made the world crawl. He moved. The net hit pavement where he'd been standing a millisecond ago. Concrete cracked under the impact. Whatever that net was made of, it hit hard. Ben scanned the rooftops. Saw movement. 4 figures. No 5, sir. Spread across multiple buildings. Professional positioning. Not random thugs. Organized. He ran. Put distance between himself and the ambush point. 3 blocks. 5 blocks. Checked behind him. They were following, keeping pace somehow despite his speed. One of them was airborne. Another seemed to be teleporting between rooftops. A third just moved fast enough to track him. Enhanced abilities. Multiple quirk users working in coordination. Ben's transformation timer flashed yellow. 2 minutes left. He couldn't maintain this pace indefinitely. He cut into a shopping district, more people, more witnesses. The pursuers would have to be careful about collateral, except they weren't being careful. A blast of compressed air hit the street ahead of him. People scattered. Someone screamed. Ben skidded to a stop, transformed back to human to conserve power. The 5 pursuers landed in a loose perimeter around him. All wore tactical gear. Dark clothing, no identifying marks, faces covered by masks or helmets. The one in front stepped forward. Tall, broad. Carried himself like someone who'd done this before. Easy way or hard way, he said. Voice modulated through a speaker. Device comes off either way. It doesn't come off, Ben said. Everything comes off if you apply enough force. Behind him, Ben heard civilians running. Good, less collateral. But some weren't moving fast enough. A woman with a child, an elderly man. People who couldn't sprint away from danger. Ben's hand moved to the Ultimatrix. You really want to do this here? We don't care about here, the leader said. We care about that. He gestured to the Ultimatrix. The other 4 spread out slightly, tightening the perimeter, cutting off escape routes. Professional. Coordinated. They'd done this kind of takedown before. Ben cycled through his options. XLR8 was down. Diamond Head would work for defense, but wouldn't help with the civilians. 4 arms had power, but not precision. Echo locked in. He transformed. Smaller body, sound-based physiology, the ability to duplicate. Ben split into 3 copies. Low charge limited the splits. Normally he could manage more, but the ultimatrix was already straining. The pursuers hesitated for exactly half a second. Then they adapted. The airborne one generated wind that tried to blow the copies apart. The teleporter appeared behind one copy and swung something that looked like a stunner. The third pursuer generated some kind of adhesive that splattered across the ground trying to trap them. Ben's copies moved in different directions. Two went for the civilians, generating sonic shields to protect them. The third went for the leader, creating a wall of sound that made it hard to advance. "Get them out!" One copy shouted to the civilians. "Move, now!" They moved. The woman with the child ran. The elderly man was slower, but a younger person helped him. The leader pushed through the sonic barrier, took damage but didn't stop. He reached for the copy hand glowing with some kind of energy. Ben combined his copies back into one and dodged. The leader's hand missed by inches. Where it passed, the air rippled like heat shimmer. Not spreading, not decaying, just distorting at the point of contact. Molecular disruption. Single point. Touch-based, but contained. Still dangerous enough. Ben generated a sonic burst that drove the leader back. Created distance, transformed back to human. The ultimatrix flashed red. Recharge needed. "Getting tired?" the leader asked. He sounded pleased. "Just getting started," Ben lied. The teleporter appeared behind him. Ben sensed the displacement, rolled forward, came up near a parked car. Used it as cover. The adhesive users splattered the car. The substance was thick, fast setting. Ben was trapped between the car and the chemical trap. The airborne pursuer generated a wind blade. Aimed not at Ben, but at the building above him. Structural damage. Controlled collapse to pin him without killing. Smart. Brutal, but smart. Ben slapped the ultimatrix. "Please work. Please have enough charge." Diamond head locked in. Barely. Crystal body, enhanced durability. He generated a shield above himself as debris fell. The crystal absorbed the impact, cracked but held. Ben pushed up. Created crystal spikes that forced the pursuers back. Generated a path through the adhesive. Moved. The leader was there, waiting. Hands still glowing with that disintegration effect. "You're resourceful," the leader said. "Makes sense why the commission can't handle you. But we're not the commission." "Who are you? Contractors? Hired to acquire specific assets?" The leader gestured to the ultimatrix. "That's a specific asset. It's bonded to my DNA. You can't remove it. We'll take the DNA too if we have to." Ben's crystal form bristled, generated more spikes. "That's a threat." "It's a promise." The other four closed in. Coordinated. Ready. Ben calculated odds. 5 against 1. Unknown quirks. Professional training. Limited ultimatrix charge. Civilians still in the area. Bad odds. The teleporter appeared at his back. Ben spun, generated a crystal barrier. The teleporter bounced off, but the movement put Ben in range of the leader's disintegration touch. The leader reached. Ben transformed. Ghost freak locked in, intangible. The leader's hand passed through him. Ben phased through the ground, dropped into the sewer system below. The transformation timed out immediately. Ben was human again, standing in ankle-deep water, breathing hard. Above, he heard the pursuers regrouping, heard the leader's modulated voice giving orders. "Split up. Cover the next 3 blocks. He'll surface somewhere." What if he stays down? He won't, not for long. Expendable, right? Ben moved through the sewer. The smell was terrible, but he ignored it. Focused on putting distance between himself and the ambush. His phone was wet but still functional. No signal down here. No way to call for help even if help was available. The ultimatrix pulsed red against his wrist. Dead battery. It needed at least an hour to recharge fully, maybe more after the strain he'd just put it through. 1 hour without transformations. 1 hour of being just human in a world full of people with superpowers who were actively hunting him. Ben kept moving, found a ladder, climbed up, emerged in an alley 3 blocks from the ambush site. Sirens wailed in the distance. Emergency response to the property damage. People would be evacuated. Streets would be closed. Heroes would investigate. The contractors had vanished before the first responder arrived. Professional exit. No trace. But they wouldn't be looking for the pursuers. They'd be looking for him. Ben pulled out his phone, checked the news. Another incident involving unregistered individual. Property damage in District 9. Casualties unknown. The article made no mention of the 5 attackers, no mention of the coordinated assault, just Ben's presence and the resulting chaos. They were framing this too, making every incident his fault regardless of who started it. Ben pocketed the phone and started walking. He needed somewhere to hole up, somewhere they couldn't track him, somewhere the ultimatrix could recharge. He found an abandoned building. Old apartment complex scheduled for demolition, no power, no water, but enough structural integrity to hide in and 4 walls between him and immediate danger. Ben climbed to the 3rd floor, found a corner room, sat with his back against the wall and stared at the ultimatrix. Red light, dead power. No transformations until it recovered. He was vulnerable. More vulnerable than he'd been since arriving in this world. His phone buzzed. Unknown number, again. Ben almost didn't answer, but a curiosity won. "Yeah, you're slower than I expected." The voice was unfamiliar. Young, male, carried an edge that suggested violence wasn't theoretical. "My people had you cornered. Your people failed. This time." A pause. Static crackled. "You're not a quirk. That's why they can't handle you. That's why you matter." "Who are you?" "Someone who knows what you're running from and what you're running toward." The voice dropped lower. "We'll take it. Or they will. Your choice which nightmare you prefer." The line went dead. Ben set down the phone, stared at the ultimatrix. They wanted it. Not just the commission trying to regulate it. Not just scientists wanting to study it. Actual villains or revolutionaries, or whatever they called themselves, wanted to acquire the ultimatrix and use it for their agenda. He'd dealt with this before. Different worlds, different people. Same fundamental problem. Unique power attracted predators. The ultimatrix pulsed, still red, still recharging. Ben closed his eyes. Let himself rest for exactly 30 minutes. Not sleep, just rest. Enough to recover some alertness. When he opened his eyes, the light outside had changed. Evening approaching. The ultimatrix was yellow now, partial charge. Enough for a few transformations, if he was careful. His phone buzzed. Not a call, a news alert. Paranormal Liberation Front claims responsibility for District 9 attack. State's target was unregistered asset. So they were going public. Making it clear they were hunting him. Making it clear the device was the objective. Ben scrolled through the article. The PLF was described as a radical organization seeking to overthrow the current hero society structure. They'd been quiet recently. Now they were active again, and they'd made him their priority target. Another alert, this one from a different source. HPSC, Issue statement. We do not negotiate with terrorist organizations. However, we urge the individual in question to surrender to proper authorities for their own protection. Their own protection. Right. They wanted him contained. The PLF wanted him acquired. Nobody was interested in actually helping. Ben stood, checked his surroundings. The abandoned building was still secure. No signs of pursuit, no sounds of approach. He had maybe 12 hours before they found him again. Maybe less. He needed a plan, needed to shift from reactive to proactive, needed to stop being prey and start being something else. But what he couldn't fight an entire organization. Couldn't defeat the Commission's resources. Couldn't even rely on the Ultimatrix indefinitely because they knew his transformations now. We're building counters, developing strategies. Ben walked to the window, looked out at the city. Lights were coming on, people were going home. Life continued with its normal rhythms despite the chaos. Somewhere out there, Eri was hiding, safe for now. But for how long? If the PLF got the Ultimatrix, if they replicated its technology, how long before they targeted her too? Targeted anyone with a useful quirk. His phone buzzed again. Aizawa. Ben answered. Yeah, you're still alive. Aizawa didn't sound relieved, just stated a fact. So far, the PLF is escalating. They've made you a strategic objective. That means they'll throw resources at acquiring you. More resources than you can handle alone. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you're about to get people killed, not by fighting, by existing near them, by making them tactical opportunities. The words hit hard, because they were true. The girl, Ben asked, still safe? My contact is good at staying hidden, but that's a temporary solution. Eventually someone will find her. Eventually the Commission will demand custody. Eventually Chisaki's lawyers will make a case for her return. That can't happen. Then you need to end this. Not by running, not by hiding, by resolving it. How? I don't know, Aizawa admitted. But what you're doing now isn't sustainable. The PLF will keep hunting, the Commission will keep tightening restrictions, and civilians will keep getting caught in the middle. What would you do? Silence. Then I'd find leverage, something that forces all parties to negotiate instead of escalate. Something that makes you more valuable cooperating than captured. The Ultimatrix is that leverage. Maybe. Or maybe you are. You've done something nobody else has. You've survived outside their systems. That knowledge is valuable. That example is dangerous. The call ended. Ben looked at the Ultimatrix. Yellow light, almost recharged. Leverage, example, value beyond just the device itself. He thought about the warehouse, about Eri, about all the ways this society claimed to protect people while actually just managing them. Maybe Aizawa was right. Maybe the way forward wasn't hiding or fighting. Maybe it was proving the system could be better, had to be better. Because the alternative was what he'd seen in that facility, with its tissue samples and production schedules. His phone buzzed. Another unknown number. Ben answered. Meeting, a voice said. Female, calm. Tomorrow, dawn, coordinates following. Come armed, come ready. This is your chance to stop running. Who is this? Someone who thinks you've made enough mistakes hiding. Time to make them in the open. The line went dead. A text arrived with coordinates. Industrial district, near the waterfront. Ben stared at the message. Could be a trap. Probably was a trap. Another ambush. Another attempt to acquire the Ultimatrix. But staying in this building wasn't sustainable. Keeping running wasn't working, and the attacks would continue regardless. At least if he walked into a trap knowingly, he could prepare for it. Ben checked the Ultimatrix. Green now, fully recharged. 63 aliens, 63 options, 63 ways to survive whatever came next. He'd faced worse odds, different planets, different threats, but always the same choice: keep fighting or give up. Ben had never been good at giving up. He climbed down from the building and started moving toward the coordinates. He had 12 hours to scout the location, to plan his approach, to figure out what kind of trap he was walking into. 12 hours to decide if this was worth the risk. He thought about Ari, about the woman with the child in District 9, about everyone who'd been caught in the crossfire of a hunt he hadn't started but couldn't escape. Yeah, it was worth it. Whatever came next, whatever the cost, he'd face it standing. Because the alternative was letting them win. Some choices weren't about winning. They were about being too stubborn to quit. Ben walked through the city, anonymous among millions. Just another teenager in a world full of superpowered individuals. Except he wasn't. He was the problem they couldn't solve. The variable that refused to be contained. And tomorrow, he'd prove it again. Not because he was brave, because he didn't know how to stop. The city started burning at dawn. Not metaphorically, literally. 3 simultaneous strikes across different districts. Infrastructure targets, communication hubs, power substations, coordinated, professional, designed to create maximum disruption with surgical precision. Ben heard about it through emergency broadcasts while hiding in an abandoned office building. His phone buzzed with alerts, evacuation orders, shelter-in-place commands, conflicting information from different sources as the system tried to respond to something it hadn't prepared for. This wasn't a villain attack. This was an offensive. He transformed into XLR-8 and ran toward District 7. The closest strike point. The place where this had all started 3 weeks ago. The streets were chaos. Not panic exactly. People in this society were too used to quirk-based threats for pure panic. But organized chaos still created casualties. Cars abandoned mid-street. People running without clear direction. Emergency services trying to establish perimeters while lacking current information. Ben skidded to a stop at the edge of the disaster zone. A bridge had collapsed. Not from structural failure. From deliberate destruction. Someone had disintegrated the support columns with surgical precision, dropping the entire span into the river below. People were in the water, some injured, some trapped in vehicles. Emergency responders were setting up, but they'd need 15 minutes to get equipment in place. Ben didn't have 15 minutes. He transformed back to human, cycled the Ultimatrix, diamond head locked in. The transformation rippled through him. Crystal body, enhanced durability, the ability to generate structures at will. He ran to the river's edge and started building. Crystal platforms extending from the shore. Bridges between debris. Handholds for people to grab. Not elegant, not permanent. Just functional enough to get people out of the water before hypothermia or drowning took them. The first person he pulled up was a woman clutching a child. Both shaking, both alive. "Move inland," Ben said. "Get clear of the water." She nodded, stumbled away with the kid. Ben kept building, kept pulling. One person, then another, then 3 more. Emergency services arrived, started coordinating with his crystal structures, using them as staging points. One of the responders, a hero with enhanced strength, gave him a nod of recognition, not approval, just acknowledgement that they were working the same problem. Ben's timer started flashing. 5 minutes left. He pulled 2 more people from a submerged car. Got them to safety. Transformed back to human as the Ultimatrix timed out. The hero with enhanced strength moved closer. "You're the one from the news." "Yeah." "HPSC wants you detained." "I know." The hero studied him, made a calculation. "Finish helping here, then run. I didn't see you." "Thanks. Don't thank me. Thank the people you just saved." The hero turned back to coordinating rescue efforts. "We've got this under control. You should move to District 9. Reports are coming in about a hospital under attack." Ben nodded and ran. Found an alley, transformed into XLR8. The city blurred around him, 3 more disaster points visible from elevated positions. Fires, collapsed buildings, places where the infrastructure had been deliberately targeted to create maximum chaos. This wasn't random violence. This was strategic disruption designed to reveal something. Ben reached District 9. The hospital was intact but surrounded, not by villains attacking, by people, civilians. Hundreds of them pressed against the perimeter trying to get in, trying to get treatment for injuries, trying to find family members. The hospital security and hero presence couldn't handle the volume. People were getting crushed. Kids separated from parents, elderly falling. Ben transformed back, cycled to Echo. The transformation completed. Smaller body, sound-based physiology, the ability to duplicate. He duplicated once, twice, 10 times, 20. The echoes spread through the crowd, using sonic pulses to create space, not attacking, just generating enough controlled sound to make people step back. Creating corridors, establishing flow patterns that moved people systematically instead of chaotically. It took 30 minutes. By the end, the crowd was organized into proper lines. Medical staff could assess priority cases. Security could maintain order without force. Ben's duplicates merged back together. The Ultimatrix flashed yellow. Overused. He'd need to be more careful. A voice crackled through nearby speakers. "Attention all heroes. Multiple simultaneous events across the city. Command is establishing triage priority. All available units report to..." The broadcast cut out, replaced by static. Then a different voice. "People of Musutafu." The voice was synthesized, distorted, but the tone was clear. "Your heroes cannot protect you. Your systems cannot save you. We are demonstrating the fragility of the order you've accepted. Watch as it crumbles." The broadcast ended. Regular emergency channels resumed, but the damage was done. People had heard. Fear started replacing cooperation. Ben ran again. XLR8. Another district, another crisis point. He found Endeavor directing hero teams near a chemical plant that had been breached. Toxic smoke rising, evacuation in progress, but slow, too slow. Ben transformed to Diamond Head, started generating crystal barriers to contain the smoke, channel it upward instead of spreading laterally. Endeavor saw him. Recognition flashed across the hero's face. But he didn't call for Ben's detention, didn't waste time on politics while people needed evacuation. "Can you hold that barrier for 10 minutes? Endeavor shouted over the chaos. "Yeah. Do it. We're clearing the surrounding blocks." Ben held the barrier, reinforced it as the smoke tried to find gaps. His arms burned. The crystal structure wanted to crack under the chemical heat. But he held it. 10 minutes. People evacuated. Emergency containment teams arrived. Endeavor moved closer. "You're supposed to be in custody." "I know, but you're here anyway." People needed help. Endeavor's expression didn't change. "Keep helping. We'll sort the rest later, assuming there's a later." He moved off. Ben let the barrier dissolve and ran to the next crisis. The pattern continued for hours, disaster after disaster. Some natural from the initial attacks, others staged to create maximum chaos. Ben responded to each one, saved who he could, built structures, controlled crowds, prevented escalation. And slowly he started noticing something. The attacks weren't random. They targeted specific things: communication infrastructure, emergency services, places where authority responded from. But they avoided certain areas, certain facilities. The pattern made sense if the goal wasn't destruction, if the goal was exposure. Ben found a quiet rooftop and looked at the city. Smoke rising from a dozen points. Emergency lights creating a strobing effect across districts. Heroes stretched thin, trying to respond to simultaneous crises. And somewhere in that chaos, someone was watching, measuring, testing the breaking point. His phone buzzed. Aizawa. "Where are you?" The hero's voice was strained. "District 11. Just finished containment on a gas leak. Central Command is collapsing. Too many simultaneous events. They're having to choose which districts to abandon." Abandon. Pull back hero presence. Let civilian evacuation proceed without protection. Hope the villains don't capitalize. Aizawa's voice carried disgust. Politics. Even now. Some districts have better optics than others. Ben's jaw tightened. Which districts? Aizawa rattled off numbers. Mostly industrial zones, poorer areas, places without media presence. "Got it," Ben said. "Don't. You can't cover everything. You'll burn out trying." "I can try." "Ben," Aizawa stopped. "They're calling this your fault. The Commission. They're saying your disruption emboldened villains, that your presence destabilized the balance. Do you believe that?" Silence. Then no. "But it doesn't matter what I believe. They're building a narrative. When this ends, you'll be the scapegoat. Then I better make sure people survive to hear that narrative." Ben ended the call, transformed, started moving toward the abandoned districts. The first one was already under attack. Not heroes. Villains, but not organized ones. Opportunists. People taking advantage of reduced hero presence to settle scores. Loot. Cause destruction for its own sake. Ben didn't fight them. He just made it impossible to continue. Diamond Head blocking paths. Echo creating sonic barriers. XLR8 evacuating people faster than the villains could threaten them. Within an hour, the opportunists retreated. Not worth the effort when the targets kept disappearing. Ben moved to the next district, then the next. Became a presence that shifted faster than anyone could track. Appeared wherever heroes weren't. Filled gaps, prevented escalation. His timer flashed red. The Ultimatrix was overheating. He'd been transforming too much, too fast. Asking more than the device was designed to sustain continuously, but stopping meant people died. So he didn't stop. District 14, a residential block trapped between two crisis points. No evacuation route. Families huddled in buildings while smoke closed in from both sides. Ben landed as 4 arms, started moving debris, creating paths through rubble. His muscles screamed. The transformation felt unstable, but he held it long enough to clear an escape route. People ran. Ben counted them, made sure families stayed together, made sure no one was left behind. The last group cleared just as the Ultimatrix timed out. Ben stumbled, caught himself against a wall. "You look terrible." He turned. Hawks stood on a nearby rooftop, wings folded, expression unreadable. "I'm fine." "You're not?" Hawks jumped down. "You've been everywhere today. How many transformations? 20, 30. Stopped counting. That thing on your wrist is smoking." Hawks gestured to the Ultimatrix. It was literally releasing small wisps of heat vapor. "You're pushing it too hard. People need help, and you can't help anyone if you burn out." Hawks's expression shifted. "Look, I'm not here to arrest you. Commission sent me to track you, but I'm not interested in following those orders right now." "Then why are you here?" "To tell you what you probably already figured out. This isn't a random attack. Someone's testing the system, seeing how much pressure it takes before heroes have to choose between following protocol and actually helping people. And they chose protocol. Some did, others didn't." Hawks pulled out a feather. It elongated into a makeshift blade. "There are heroes out there ignoring orders, going to the abandoned districts, helping anyway. You're not alone in this. Doesn't change what happens after." "No, it doesn't." Hawks resheathed the feather. "But it changes what's possible during, and right now during matters more than after." Ben pushed off the wall, checked his phone. 7 more crisis points marked as unaddressed, 7 more places where people were on their own. "Central District," Hawks said, reading his expression. "Major offensive starting there in 20 minutes. That's where this gets decided, where villain leadership is making their real move. And the Commission, sending everyone they've got. Endeavor, Aizawa, every available hero." Hawks met his eyes. Hawks met his, "You should be there too, not to fight, but because whatever happens there will determine what happens everywhere else." Ben looked at the Ultimatrix, still overheated, still smoking slightly. He'd need to let it cool. But people didn't stop needing help just because his equipment was stressed. "I'll be there," Ben said. Hawks nodded, spread his wings. "Try not to die. Would be a waste after all this." He took off. Ben watched him go, then started moving toward the Central District. Human form. Saving the Ultimatrix for when it really mattered. The Central District was a war zone, not figuratively. Actually, heroes forming perimeter. Villains holding key positions. Civilians caught in between. The kind of situation that should have been evacuated hours ago, but hadn't been because resources were spread too thin. Ben found Endeavor coordinating near the perimeter. The hero saw him approach. Didn't call for his arrest, just gestured him closer. "Can you create barriers?" Endeavor asked. "Yeah, Diamond Head. We need containment. Keep the fight from spreading. Keep civilians out of the crossfire." Endeavor's voice was pure tactical assessment. "You do that, we handle the offensive." "Got it." Ben transformed. Diamond Head's crystal body materialized. He started building walls, not to trap, to channel, to create safe zones and funnel combat away from civilians. The fight started. It wasn't like fights in Ben's world. No grand speeches, no posturing, just professional violence between people who'd trained their entire lives for this. Heroes with capture-specific quirks, villains with counters to those quirks. A chess match played at high speed with lives as stakes. Ben focused on his job. Barriers, safe zones. When a building started to collapse, he caught it with crystal supports. When fire spread toward trapped civilians, he created barriers that directed the flames elsewhere. He didn't fight villains, didn't engage in combat, just made it harder for anyone to cause collateral damage. An hour in, he saw him. Shigaraki, standing on a rooftop, watching, not fighting, just observing with the kind of focus that meant calculation. Their eyes met across the battlefield. Shigaraki smiled. Not friendly, not hostile, just acknowledging. Then he moved, not toward Ben, toward a civilian evacuation corridor, where families were trying to escape, where the barriers were thinnest. Ben ran. Diamond Head's crystalline body wasn't fast, but it was durable. He reached the corridor just as Shigaraki's hand touched the ground. Decay spread. The pavement disintegrated. Buildings started crumbling. Ben generated a crystal platform under the civilians, lifted them above the decay wave, held it while people ran. Shigaraki watched. Interesting choice, protecting them instead of stopping me. You're not the priority, Ben said. I should be. I could kill you right now. You could try. You'd fail, and people would die while we fought. Ben kept the platform steady. That what you want, more bodies? Shigaraki's expression shifted, something between curiosity and recognition. You really don't get it. This society needs bodies, needs threat, needs the constant reminder that safety is fragile. That's how heroes exist. That's how you justify yourself. And you're different. Shigaraki gestured to the battlefield. You're here fighting their war, using your power to prop up their broken system. How is that different? I'm not fighting their war, Ben said. The last civilian cleared the corridor. He let the crystal platform dissolve. I'm keeping people alive while you all figure out your war matters more than them. Shigaraki studied him. You'll have to choose eventually. Heroes or villains. System or chaos. I choose the people caught in between. There is no in between. That's the point. Shigaraki stepped back. But you'll figure that out. When the system forces you to choose. When staying neutral means letting something terrible happen. He turned and walked away. Just like that. No fight, no dramatic confrontation, just a conversation and then distance. Ben stood there for a moment, looked at the battlefield. Heroes fighting villains, both sides using civilians as justification, both sides creating situations where those civilians needed protection. And both sides failing to acknowledge that the system creating these conflicts was the problem. His timer flashed red. The Ultimatrix was critically overheated. Another transformation might damage it permanently. Ben transformed back to human, staggered. The exhaustion hit all at once. Too many transformations, too much stress. His body wasn't meant to push this hard for this long. Aizawa found him. You need to pull back. People are being evacuated now. We've stabilized the perimeter. The main offensive is broken. Aizawa grabbed his shoulder. You've done enough. More than enough. It's not over. No, it's not. Aizawa looked at the Ultimatrix. But you're at your limit, and they know it. Everyone, heroes, villains, commission. Aizawa's voice dropped. They've all been watching you today, measuring what you can do, how long you can do it, where your limits are. Ben's stomach went cold. This was a test. Part of it was. Part was genuine attack, part was opportunism. But yes, someone was testing the system, testing the heroes, testing you. Why? Because you're the variable that doesn't fit their models. And they need to know if you're an asset worth capturing or a threat worth eliminating. Ben looked at the city, smoke still rising from a dozen points. Emergency services working overtime, heroes exhausted. System strained to breaking, but not yet broken. What did they learn, Ben asked. That you can change the game, that you can be everywhere at once if you push hard enough, that you prioritize civilians over victory. Aizawa released his shoulder. And that you have limits. That you can be worn down. That eventually you'll have to stop. And then what? Then they make their real move. Whatever this was leading to, Aizawa gestured to the battlefield. This wasn't the end. This was set up. Ben's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. Impressive performance today. The voice was synthesized, the same one from the earlier broadcast. You saved approximately 473 people across 12 districts, prevented 17 major casualties, extended response times by an average of 8 minutes across the board. Who is this? Someone who's been studying you. Someone who understands what you represent. The voice paused. You're proof that power doesn't need quirks, that strength can exist outside their framework, that their entire system is built on a foundation that could be removed. If you're trying to recruit me, I'm not recruiting, I'm informing. Tomorrow will demonstrate what happens when that foundation shakes. When quirks themselves become unreliable. When heroes and villains both lose the thing that defines them. What are you talking about? You'll see, and then you'll understand. This society worships power, depends on it. Can't imagine existence without it. But you've seen the alternative. You've been that alternative. So when the time comes, you'll know what to do. The call ended. Ben stared at his phone, then at the Ultimatrix. Still overheated, still smoking slightly. Aizawa watched him. What was that? Someone who thinks they know what I am. Do they? Ben thought about Shigaraki's words, about having to choose, about there being no in-between. Thought about the Commission's response, about abandoned districts and triage priorities, about systems that protected some people while sacrificing others. Thought about Eri, about warehouses full of suppression vials, about all the places where the society's order had failed to protect the people it claimed to serve. I don't know, Ben said, but I'm about to find out. The city continued burning. Emergency services continued responding. The machine ground forward with mechanical precision, damaged but not broken. And somewhere in that machine, someone was preparing to remove a crucial component. To show what happened when the foundation itself became unstable. Ben looked at the Ultimatrix one more time. It had cooled slightly. Enough for maybe one more transformation, if absolutely necessary. He hoped it wouldn't be necessary, but hope had never been his strategy. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. And he'd respond. Because that's what he did. That's who he was. But tonight, he needed rest. Needed to let the Ultimatrix cool completely. Needed to prepare for whatever demonstration was coming. Aizawa guided him away from the battlefield, to a safe house, unofficial, off the books. Get some sleep, the hero said. Tomorrow's going to be worse. How do you know? Because today was a preview. Tomorrow's the main event. Ben lay down on an uncomfortable cot in a room with no windows. Closed his eyes, tried to rest. But sleep wouldn't come, because he'd seen the pattern now, seen the test, seen what they were measuring. They wanted to know if the system could survive without quirks. If heroes were heroes because of their powers or because of their choices. If villains were villains because of their abilities or because of their goals. And they'd chosen Ben to demonstrate the answer. Ben, who'd saved people all day without a quirk. Who'd operated outside their framework and proven that power didn't need their system to exist. They were going to show the world what he'd already shown them. That quirks weren't necessary. That the foundation could be removed. And then they'd watch what happened when an entire society confronted that truth. Ben's hand went to the ultimatrix. Still warm, still his. Tomorrow he'd have to decide. Not just what to do, but what it meant. Whether saving people when the system failed made him a hero or just someone who couldn't stand by. Whether there really was an in-between. Or, if Shigaraki was right, that eventually everyone had to choose. System or chaos, order or freedom, control or consequence. Ben closed his eyes and tried to rest. Tomorrow would answer all of it. One way or another. The city was burning. Not literally, not yet. But the pressure had built to a point where ignition felt inevitable. 3 days of escalating conflict. Heroes stretched beyond capacity. Villains operating openly. Civilians caught between institutional failure and revolutionary violence. And at the center, the ultimatrix. Ben stood on a rooftop in District 7 watching smoke rise from 6 different locations. Emergency sirens created a constant background drone. News helicopters circled like carrion birds. The meeting at dawn had been a setup. Of course it had. But he'd gone anyway because staying hidden meant watching people die while he did nothing. They'd ambushed him with coordination. Heroes and PLF, working separately toward the same goal, containing him, acquiring the device. Neither side caring about the collateral as long as they achieved their objective. Ben had fought, transformed through a dozen forms, saved who he could, escaped with damage to the city and his conscience. And now, standing here, watching the aftermath, he understood something fundamental. This wouldn't stop. Not with negotiation, not with cooperation, not with him leaving or surrendering or fighting harder. As long as quirks existed as the basis of power, as long as society organized itself around who had abilities and who didn't, people like Eri would be resources. People like him would be threats. And people caught in between would be acceptable losses. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed. It just wasn't designed for everyone. His phone buzzed. Aizawa. Where are you? The hero's voice was tight. Controlled exhaustion. Watching, Ben said. Watching what? Everything fall apart. You were right. I can't keep doing this. Every action makes it worse. Then stop acting. I tried that. People died. Silence, then. So what's your plan? Ben looked at the ultimatrix. Green light, fully charged. He'd been rationing transformations, preparing. Something I should have done days ago, he said. Something that'll make everyone angry. Ben, keep Eri safe. When this is over, make sure she gets somewhere good. Somewhere real. What are you going to do? Prove a point. He ended the call. Below, another explosion. Heroes responding, villains engaging. The dance of power against power abilities, canceling abilities. Everything decided by who had the better quirk. Ben closed his eyes. Ran through the plan one more time. Checked the variables, calculated the risks. This would hurt. Would make enemies of everyone. would prove he was exactly the threat they'd labeled him, but it would also prove something else. That their system only functioned because nobody questioned the foundation. Time to question it. Ben transformed. Gray matter first, 4 inches tall, enhanced cognition that turned tactical planning into instinct. He needed 3 things, 3 elements synchronized perfectly. No room for error. Element 1 positioning. He'd mapped the city's infrastructure over the past week. Knew which points would amplify the effect, which locations would serve as broadcast nodes. Element 2, timing. The battlefield was active. Heroes and villains both engaged. Maximum concentration of quirk usage, maximum dependency on powers. Element 3, duration. Not too long. Just long enough. Enough to prove the point without causing permanent damage. Gray matter's brain processed it all in seconds. The math worked. Barely. But it worked. He transformed back to human. The Ultimatrix glowed brighter than usual, like it understood what was coming. Ben jumped from the rooftop, transformed to XLR8 mid-fall, hit the ground running. He moved through the city faster than cameras could track, planted the first relay, a small device he'd built from salvaged electronics and gray matter's understanding of frequency modulation. District 3, District 9, District 12, 7 locations total, each one calculated to create a resonance field. The Ultimatrix flashed yellow. He was burning through transformations fast, using multiple forms in rapid succession to position everything correctly. Final relay placed. Ben stood in the center of District 7 and checked his work. 7 points, 7 frequencies, 1 synchronized pulse. He transformed one more time. Echo, echo. The form that could generate and manipulate sound on scales most people couldn't perceive. Ben split into 7 copies. Each one moved to a relay point. Each one began generating the baseline frequency. Not loud, not destructive, just precise. A tone that matched the biological signature of quirk activation. The specific frequency that occurred when someone's ability engaged with reality. Ben had noticed it during the ambushes, during the fights, the way quirks felt when they activated. Like reality bending around a specific pitch. He'd wondered if that pitch could be disrupted. Now he'd find out. All 7 copies synchronized. The tone built, harmonics layered. The city's infrastructure amplified it through metal and concrete and the electromagnetic spectrum. The frequency reached critical mass. Everything stopped. Not suddenly. Not violently. Just stopped. Fire quirks flickered and died. Strength enhancements faded. Flight powers cut out, forcing flyers to land quickly. Transformation quirks reverted. Every ability that relied on that fundamental frequency found itself unable to engage. Silence fell across the battlefield. Heroes stopped mid-action. Villains stopped mid-attack. Everyone stood frozen, not by force, but by sudden absolute absence of the power they'd relied on. Ben maintained the frequency, felt the strain immediately. Echo's copies were working at maximum capacity. The Ultimatrix was already flashing red. This couldn't last long. Didn't need to last long. Just needed to last long enough for everyone to understand. Below, he saw a hero try to activate their quirk. Saw confusion, then fear. Then the realization that their power wasn't responding. Saw a villain do the same. Same confusion, same fear. For the first time in generations, this society experienced powerlessness. Not as individuals, as a collective. Ben's copies began to falter. The strain was enormous. The Ultimatrix wasn't designed for this kind of sustained precision output. Warning signals flashed across the interface. Overheating. System stress. Forced shutdown imminent. Ben held it for 30 more seconds, long enough for the heroes to realize they couldn't fight. Long enough for the villains to realize they couldn't win. Long enough for everyone to see each other as people instead of power classifications. Then he let it go. The frequency collapsed. Ben's copies merged back into one. He transformed to human and immediately collapsed. The Ultimatrix went dark. Not red. Dark. Complete shutdown from overload. Around him, quirks returned. Slowly, unsteadily, like muscles remembering how to work after being paralyzed. But they returned. Ben hadn't erased anything, hadn't destroyed anything, just interrupted. Temporarily, deliberately. He lay on the pavement breathing hard, staring at the dead Ultimatrix on his wrist. Footsteps approached. Multiple sets. Heroes. Probably. Coming to contain him now that he couldn't transform. Ben didn't try to run. Couldn't have run if he wanted to. The effort had drained everything. Don't move. Aizawa's voice. Calm, but carrying authority. Ben turned his head slightly. Saw the hero standing there. Capture weapon ready. Other heroes behind him. Wasn't planning to, Ben said. What did you do? Proved a point. By taking everyone's quirks. By showing they could be taken. Ben pushed himself to sitting. Every muscle ached. For 30 seconds, this city had no powers. No heroes, no villains, just people making choices. That wasn't your choice to make. Someone had to make it. Ben looked at the Ultimatrix. Still dark. Everyone keeps saying the system works. That regulation is necessary. That control prevents chaos. But the system let Eri get used as a resource. Let warehouses full of quirk-nullifying bullets exist. Let everything spiral to this. So you decided to break it. I decided to show it was already broken. Ben met Aizawa's eyes. When your entire society depends on one thing, and that thing can be switched off, you don't have a society. You have a house of cards. Around them, the city was reorganizing. Emergency services moving. People helping each other without relying on quirks. The fundamental machinery of civilization functioning even without superpowers. Proving Ben's point better than words could. Aizawa stared at him for a long moment. Then he lowered his capture weapon slightly. You're under arrest, he said, for unauthorized quirk usage, for disrupting public order, for... He paused. For a lot of things. I know. But... Aizawa glanced at the other heroes. Given the current situation, detention will be delayed until we ensure all civilians are safe and accounted for. Translation, they weren't sure what to do with him yet. Ben nodded. Understood. A news helicopter circled overhead. Cameras rolling, broadcasting everything. By tomorrow, the whole country would know. The teenager who'd shut down quirks across multiple districts. Who'd proven the system's fundamental vulnerability. They'd call him a terrorist, a threat. Someone who'd attacked the very foundation of their society. And they'd be right. But they'd also have to answer questions. About why their system was so fragile. About why they'd let facilities like Chisaki's operate. About whether control was the same as protection. Ben stood slowly. His legs barely held him. The girl, he said. Eri. She stays safe. That's non-negotiable. She's already in protective custody, Aizawa replied. Real protective custody. Not the kind that comes with medical experiments. Good. For what it's worth, Aizawa said quietly, you weren't completely wrong. Just mostly wrong. Mostly stupid. Wrong implies you didn't understand the consequences. Stupid means you understood and did it anyway. Ben almost smiled. Yeah, that sounds right. They took him in. Not roughly, not with excessive force, just professionally. Like they were processing a problem they didn't fully understand yet. The HPSC facility was in chaos when they arrived. People rushing between rooms, urgent meetings, emergency protocols. Someone had just proven their entire regulatory framework was theater. That all their oversight and licensing and control was meaningless against someone who could simply turn off the thing they were regulating. They put Ben in a room. Different from the one before, more secure, more isolated. He sat at the table and waited. The ultimatrix remained dark. He tried activating it once during transport. Nothing. Complete shutdown. Might be permanent. Might just need time. Either way, he was human. Powerless. Exactly like everyone else had been during the blackout. The irony wasn't lost on him. Hours passed. Ben lost track of time. No windows in this room. No indicators of day or night. Finally, the door opened. Not Miyazaki. Not Tanaka. Someone new. Older. More weight to their presence. Mr. Tennyson, the man said. I'm Commissioner Watanabe. We need to have a conversation. About what happens next? Watanabe sat across from him. No tablet, no documents, just direct eye contact. You've created a significant problem. I solved a significant problem. You proved our entire social structure is vulnerable to someone with the right technology. You've given every villain organization in the country a blueprint for how to disable heroes. You've terrified millions of people who thought their powers were permanent. Their powers are permanent, Ben said. I just showed they're not absolute. That's a distinction most people don't appreciate. Maybe they should. Watanabe leaned back, studied Ben. The commission is prepared to make an offer. A real one this time. Not a provisional framework. A genuine position within our organization. As what? A weapon? As an advisor. Someone who understands power from a perspective we don't have. Someone who's seen systems fail and knows how to prevent it. Ben laughed. Couldn't help it. You want to hire the person who just embarrassed you. I want to prevent someone else from doing what you did. But worse. Permanently. Watanabe's expression didn't change. You showed restraint. You could have held that blackout longer. Could have caused permanent damage. But you didn't. That suggests judgment, maturity, qualities we need. And if I refuse, then we'll figure out what laws you've broken and how to prosecute them. It won't be easy. You're not a citizen. You don't have legal standing. But we'll make something work. And you'll spend time detained while we sort it out. The threat was clear. Cooperate or face indefinite custody. Ben looked at his hands, thought about Eri, about the warehouse, about everything that had led to this moment. I want 3 things, he said. I'm listening. 1. Eri stays in real protective custody. No medical facilities, no research programs, actual safety. Agreed. 2. The investigation into Shie Hasekai continues. No sealed files. No priority classification. Public accountability. Watanabe hesitated. That will be complicated. That's my condition. Fine, within reason. 3. Ben met Watanabe's eyes. When I figure out how to go home, you let me. No questions, no strings. I walk away. You'd leave. This isn't my world. I was helping because people needed help, but I don't belong here. And trying to make me belong will just cause more problems. Watanabe considered that. If you agree to consult until then, share what you know. Help us improve. As long as improvement means actually protecting people, not just controlling them. I can't promise perfection. I'm not asking for perfection. Just effort. Real effort. Watanabe stood, extended his hand. Then we have an agreement. Ben shook it, felt the weight of what he'd just committed to. The device, Watanabe said, gesturing to the Ultimatrix. Is it permanent damage? Don't know. Might be. Might just need time to recover. I hope it recovers. Despite everything, the technology represents something important. A perspective on power we've never had. He left. Ben sat alone again. The Ultimatrix remained dark against his wrist. Silent, dormant. He'd done what he came to do. Saved Eri. Exposed the cracks in the system. Forced them to acknowledge their vulnerability. And in doing so, made himself part of the problem he'd tried to fix. Not a hero, not a villain. Something else. Something uncomfortable. A mirror. Days passed. Ben consulted, answered questions, explained what he'd done and why. The media coverage was predictably split. Half the country saw him as a terrorist. Half saw him as necessary correction. Nobody was neutral. Eri visited once, escorted by Aizawa. She looked better, less exhausted, still wary but healing. She didn't say much, just held Ben's hand for a few minutes, then left. It was enough. The Ultimatrix flickered green one morning, just for a second, then went dark again. Not dead. Recovering. Ben tested it carefully. Transformed into gray matter. The change held for 5 seconds before timing out. Progress. Weeks turned into months. Ben's advisory role became something more routine. The HPSC actually listened sometimes. Actually implemented changes, small ones. Nothing revolutionary, but real. They created better oversight for medical facilities. Required independent inspections, made it harder to seal investigations without public record. Because of Eri? Because of Ben's exposure of what had been allowed to happen. It wasn't perfect. Wasn't even close to perfect. But it was better than before. And sometimes Ben had learned better was the best you could get. One morning, the Ultimatrix activated fully. Green light. Stable charge, full functionality. Ben transformed, tested each alien. Everything worked. He went to Watanabe's office. It's time, he said. The commissioner nodded. You figured out how to go home. I think so, the same frequency that caused the blackout. If I reverse it, create a dimensional resonance instead of disruption, you'll tear a hole in reality. Temporarily, just long enough to step through. Watanabe stood, walked to the window. You've been helpful. More helpful than I expected. Are you sure you want to leave? This isn't my world, Ben said. I helped because people needed help. But the work of fixing the society belongs to the people who live here. Some would say you've earned a place here. Some would say I've earned a prison cell. Both are probably right. Ben looked at the ultimatrix. Better I go before those groups have to agree. Fair enough. Watanabe turned, extended his hand again. Thank you. For everything. Even the parts that made us angry. Ben shook it. Make sure Eri gets a real childhood. Not just safety. Actual happiness. We will. You have my word. Ben left the building, found a quiet spot in the same district where he'd arrived. Full circle. He activated the ultimatrix. Started the sequence. The air rippled. Reality bent. A crack formed. Through it, Ben saw something familiar. Earth. His Earth. Home. He started to step through. Ben! He turned. Aizawa stood there, out of breath like he'd run. You're leaving, the hero said. Yeah. Without saying goodbye. Figured you'd prefer that. Aizawa almost smiled. Probably would have. But... He pulled out a small card. This has a direct number. Encrypted. If you ever come back. If you ever need help. Call. Ben took the card, pocketed it. Thanks. Don't thank me. Just don't come back and break reality again. Can't promise that. Didn't think you could. They stood there for a moment. Two people from different worlds who'd been forced to work together and somehow made it work. The girl, Ben asked. Happy, safe, learning to smile again. Aizawa's expression softened slightly. Because of you. Because she deserved better. Everyone does. But not everyone fights for it like you did. Ben nodded, turned back to the portal. Hey, Aizawa called. For what it's worth, you were right. About some of it. Not all of it. But some. That's all anyone gets. Ben stepped through the portal. Reality folded. The crack sealed. He was back. His Earth. His universe. Where the plumbers were imperfect but trying. Where people knew him. Where he belonged. The ultimatrix pulsed green against his wrist. Ben looked at it. Thought about the world he'd just left. About Eri. About Aizawa. About a society forced to confront its foundation. They'd survive. Probably. Might even improve. Slowly, painfully, but improve. Because that's what people did when they couldn't rely on power alone. They adapted, cooperated, became better versions of themselves. Or they didn't and collapsed under their own contradictions. Either way, it wasn't his problem anymore. Ben started walking. Home. Back to his own complications, his own responsibilities. Behind him, the place where the portal had been was empty. No evidence it had ever existed. Just another day in a world where the impossible happened regularly. Ben smiled slightly. Yeah, he could live with that. His phone buzzed. Gwen calling, probably wondering where he'd been for the past few months. That was going to be a fun conversation. Ben answered. Hey, where have you been? You've been gone for... I know, it's complicated. I'll explain when I get back. You better. Grandpa's been worried. I will. Promise. Ben looked at the sky. Different stars than the MHA world. But still beautiful. Just had to help someone. Turned into a whole thing. Doesn't it always... Yeah, pretty much. He kept walking. The ultimatrix pulsed steadily, ready for whatever came next. In another world, in another universe, a society was learning to function without absolute dependence on power. And in this one, Ben Tennyson was just trying to get home before dinner. Some things never changed. And that was fine. Because the things that needed to change had changed. even if it took breaking reality to make it happen.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and be sure to turn on notification so you won't miss out future videos. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.